The reporters asked the guy if it was true that he once cleared an A-rank dungeon alone. There were rumors that he had defeated an S-rank hunter during the recent dungeon breakthrough incident, and had he been hiding his awakening level all this time? The fact that he made money by becoming a hunter was supposedly a simple coincidence and had nothing to do with his abilities, which those gathered were gossiping about. In fact, he had gotten here thanks to a pinch of luck and bluff, because now he was insignificant in the full sense of the word. People wondered. With the emergence of new high-level awakening zones, the requirements for hunters had increased. What were his future plans in this context? The guy himself didn't quite understand what these journalists were talking about. He didn't understand what plans they were talking about, because if everything really ended, maybe he would have them. But what if they found out that he was an F-rank hunter? The S-rank hunter he supposedly defeated would probably want to tear him to shreds. And the prankster he entered the dungeon with back then would hardly leave him alone. Perhaps he was even cursed, and it became a real disaster. People on the bus watched a live broadcast in which the guy talked about his next steps. He was unwilling to answer, and commentators were shocked that he simply brushed off the question, considering it rude. After these words, the journalist suddenly became speechless, deciding that he thereby admitted the fact of manipulation with his awakening rank. Their cameras immediately started clicking, and he was asked if he had any words for the Hunters Association. Everyone shouted that he was a hunter and begged him to say something. The boy hung his head, knowing that tomorrow's headlines would be terrible no matter what he answered. If he doesn't fix the situation, he risks dying as a worthless hunter. He said he would not comment on anything and called journalists mammals. Everyone immediately froze, not understanding what he was even talking about, and were in shock. People began to demand clarification of what exactly he meant by mammals. They asked him again if he really had an S rank, and they didn't let up and asked him to answer all the questions. The boy didn't care whether they saw him as a powerful being hiding power or a useless hunter. The guy wasn't planning on staying on this planet anyway. He couldn't figure out when everything went downhill, but it all started with his resignation. To begin with, it was important to clarify one detail. He was not actually a resident of this planet, because his home was on Alfori, a planet with a highly developed magical civilization, where he played the role of supreme mage. However, at some point, a crazy but interesting thought came to him. He wanted to escape from his planet. His work was considered socially important, so even hard work was not paid generously, and he worked 640 working days a year without vacations or days off. Since advanced technology has freed them from the need for food and sleep, overwork has become the norm. He couldn't even remember the last time he left work on time. But if you think about it, the main problem was how to resign, because he was entrusted with too important a role to just leave it. High-ranking beings had extremely limited ability to escape from work. For example, his brain would receive an electric shock if he tried to use teleportation magic. Even if he somehow managed to escape from his workplace, it would be impossible to hide from the rulers on this planet. Then he wondered why not just get rid of them. But this also proved impossible, since he could not harm the creatures of his own race. This even concerned himself, so even suicide was excluded. However, during another brainstorming session, one idea came to him. Magic limited only his body, but not the soul, because the technology for manipulating the soul did not yet exist. This meant that the soul could help him escape, and he thought this was an excellent plan. He lived with this idea for 10 years, and after much trial and error, he created a unique magic spell. It was called soul manipulation, and with it, he was able to separate his soul and move to a distant planet where no one would pursue him. The plan worked, and he considered himself a real genius. He cursed his previous job and wished luck to everyone who now had to cope with running the planet without him, and he himself officially resigned. Thus, the first transmigration of souls in history took place. The guy opened his eyes, saw that he was lying on the floor, and looked at his hand. He couldn't understand what it was. It looked like an elongated protein mass. He was lucky because the soul of the previous owner apparently recently left this body. In any case, his plan worked, because even reincarnation was a mere trifle for him. He started to get up, tried to say something, and to his surprise, the pronunciation of the local language felt completely natural. There were no problems with motor functions either. According to the plan, he was supposed to inherit all the memories of the previous owner of the body, so that even his loved ones would not notice the substitution. Then why does he remember almost nothing about this body? The memories seemed to be torn into separate fragments. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his stomach and thought that something had gone wrong. He remembered that this body had died of hunger, and yet he himself had set certain conditions before using magic. The first condition was to reincarnate as a being with the highest level of magical power on the planet, which meant it was logical to expect the highest intelligence. But he completely forgot to take into account the current state of the body he had moved into. He thought that thanks to the first condition he would avoid unnecessary problems, but the pain in his stomach was unbearable, as if acid had been poured into it. The magic didn't start working immediately after reincarnation, and it seemed like it would take him some time to adapt to the magic of this planet. But first, the guy decided to fill his stomach with at least something to relieve the pain. He looked out the window and noticed a light. His home was almost completely covered in liquid. Starlight did not reach the depths, and they lived in constant darkness. This place was completely different from where he had lived before. The atmosphere here was bright, warm, light, and dry, with firm footing. But when his stomach began to rumble even louder, he realized that now was not the time to think. He urgently needed food. He walked down the street and couldn't understand why he couldn't find anything edible. Now it became clear why the previous owner of the body died of hunger. Everything around was made of inedible hard rock. If this continues, this body will die again. Suddenly, he noticed a living creature on the floor. A cockroach, quite small. But now was not the time to choose. He picked up the cockroach, brought it to his mouth, and mentally thanked him for the food. At that moment, he noticed a small boy, a representative of this species, passing by him. It appeared to be a young individual, and he noticed something that looked like food in its mouth. Apparently, he had food, so he threw the cockroach away, deciding that the boy's looked much more appetizing. He wondered whether to take the food by force, a life-changing dilemma. He decided to follow the boy, but he stopped abruptly, sensing something was wrong. The boy turned around, saw a suspicious man, and ran away. The guy tried to catch up with him, but suddenly noticed flower pots nearby. They contained ornamental plants that did not look edible, but he decided to try them anyway. It's still better than stealing someone else's food. He didn't have time to eat the plant when he heard someone scream. He realized that it was the same boy who was screaming and decided to check what had happened. The boy stood and trembled, and fear was frozen in his eyes. In front of him was a huge bird with a red feather, a real monster. The monster noticed the boy and rushed towards him while he ran away, screaming. He caught up with him and with a powerful movement grabbed his briefcase with his huge beak, not allowing the boy to run away. Then he raised his head and deftly snatched the briefcase from the boy's hands, as if it were easy prey. The boy lost his balance, fell to the ground, and looked up in horror at the giant bird. She rushed towards him, trying to strike with her beak, but instead of hitting her target, she crashed hard into a car parked nearby. The boy, without wasting a second, jumped to his feet and rushed down the street, loudly shouting requests for help. A guy passing by noticed this scene, and his gaze was immediately drawn to a feathered creature the size of a house. The huge bird got entangled in the wires and cables hanging over the road, and the guy was shocked that he encountered something like this while just walking down the street. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with this civilization, although, to be honest, there were plenty of oddities here. And suddenly, the thought occurred to him that perhaps all this was even for the best. Some part of his memory remained, and this colossus was associated with food for him. It seemed he could even imagine its taste. He was delighted, because a wild animal is suitable prey for a great magician, and he doesn't even have to lift a finger to kill it. Once he adapts to the local magic, conquering this tiny planet will be a piece of cake. Suddenly he felt a powerful flow of magical power around him. This power seemed to permeate every cell of his body. It was definitely local magic. But he immediately fell to the ground because there was too much of it. In comparison, if magic on his home planet was like a full bucket, the concentration of magic here resembled an entire swimming pool. The boy didn't understand how such a place could exist and felt incredibly lucky. He was already imagining his dazzling future, With so much magic, nothing was impossible. Suddenly, that same boy called out to him and asked for help. The guy didn't understand how one could so carelessly ask for help from a complete stranger. But what if it was not he in front of him, but the greatest magician Alfori? He said that he would help, but on one condition. The condition was that the boy had to give him what he was holding in his hand. At that moment, the bird began to break free from the cables that were shocking it. The boy, bursting into tears, agreed and promised to give him everything he wanted if only he would save him. The boy ran away, and the guy was in shock because he could not understand how one could so easily turn his back to the predator. He covered the boy with his hand and told him to hold on to him. As the head of the first magic division, which was in charge of the planet's defense, he was able to separate bones from flesh in a single move. He put his hands forward, but nothing happened. This seemed strange to him. Perhaps his concentration was impaired by the unfamiliar surroundings. He didn't expect to encounter something like this and even laughed. He decided to use explosive magic, but it didn't work either. He then tried water magic, shadow summoning, and a curse, but none of it worked. The boy looked at his trembling hands in shock, not understanding why he couldn't use magic. Now, the guy was running away from the winged monster and calling for help. Without looking ahead, he ran across the road where cars were driving. One of the drivers almost hit the guy, but managed to slow down, violating traffic rules. He climbed out of the car window and screamed, calling the guy an idiot and asking if he really wanted to die. At this time, the guy was thinking about the bird that was chasing him, realizing that it would chase him as long as it saw him, and he needed to urgently change direction. Just a couple of wing beats and the bird was almost upon him. The boy realized that he had run out onto a wide road where it would be easy for the bird to catch him. He didn't understand why she was chasing him, because he hadn't eaten anything, felt weak, and got tired quickly. Realizing that things were getting worse, he suddenly decided to change the direction of his run, hoping to at least slightly break away from his pursuer. The huge bird pushed off powerfully from the asphalt, leaving deep cracks in it, and quickly soared into the air, rushing after him. The blonde watched in horror and surprise as this monstrous creature was actually able to fly, despite its size. At this rate, he understood that a little more, and he himself could very well be torn apart and eaten. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced him, and he realized that this body already had old injuries. Unable to bear the load and pain, the boy stumbled and fell to the ground with a dull thud. As he began to rise, catching his breath with effort, a bright red beam suddenly flashed above him. Several shining beams flashed around the monstrous bird, and it, losing control, began to fall rapidly. A moment later, she crashed her beak into a massive wall with a crash and got stuck in it, blocking her path. The deafening sound of the blow made the boy cover his ears with his palms and close his eyes tightly. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the bird was injured, but he did not understand what had just happened. He found it hard to believe that the monster had actually crashed into the wall and died. This bird seems to be completely brainless. He remembered that some birds dived at dangerous angles and crashed, and he wanted to ask local scientists why these creatures were so stupid. Feeling a rumble in his stomach, he realized that now was not the time to think, and touched the bird's neck, wondering if it was edible. He assumed that it must be a local species, which meant that its amino acid structure was good. Suddenly he heard a sound and turned around, seeing a dark-haired girl in front of him. A little earlier, a little boy called a policeman and a girl, because the monster was chasing his uncle, and they rushed to help. They ran to the scene, and the girl asked the policeman if the monsters had been seen there last. The police officer confirmed that the monster was seen in this area. The girl said that in that case it was dangerous to approach, because in front of them was the Rookie Killer, a bird monster that lived near the sand-type gate. This monster was originally thought to be an E-rank monster and could be defeated with a regular firearm. However, the Rookie Killer rank was later raised to C, as it is capable of developing critically dangerous speed. Hunters below C rank didn't even have time to react to the attack, and had to act quickly to avoid casualties. And then, in the place where the dead bird already lay, she saw a man. She was in complete shock. Could he really have dealt with the monster alone? The police ran up to them and immediately turned to Sun Wuyan, asking what exactly the problem was. The boy, breathing heavily, shouted to the guy that it was he who brought the police to help. The police, having made sure that the boy was okay, were visibly pleased and expressed gratitude for the assistance provided. They explained that they received a signal about the appearance of a dangerous monster and immediately arrived at the scene, and, fortunately, a hunter was nearby. The guy couldn't understand who the hunters were because his memory didn't store such information. The policeman thanked him again for catching the monster, and the girl was amazed that he dealt with the monster so quickly. She wondered if this guy really ended up here by accident or if it was something else. The rookie killer's habitat is quicksand, and it is easier to catch it outside if you use the hard surface correctly. This requires eyes that can track the bird's movements, and if you look closely, that is exactly how it was killed. It turns out that this hunter's rank is at least C. The guy immediately turned to the boy and asked if he had forgotten about their agreement. The boy silently handed him a bottle of drink, and the boy took a sip with delight. He had long since evolved into a creature that did not need food, but the taste of the drink seemed incredible to him. Sun Woo Yeon was shocked that the guy had just taken food from a child. She came up, said hello, and introduced herself, saying that she worked for the Hunters Association. She shook his hand and praised him for defeating the monster without a scratch. Her face showed that she didn't know him, and she asked if he was a free hunter, asking to see his license. The guy continued drinking the tangerine drink and did not understand what kind of license she needed. He decided to get out of it and said that he didn't take her with him. Sun Woo Yeon replied that in that case, she would simply look for him in the association's database. She asked his name, and the guy panicked a little because he didn't know the name of this body. The girl asked again if he really had a hunter's license and if he had passed the awakening test. This was the last thing he needed. If they found out he had used his abilities without registering, it would be bad. The girl continued to scream, saying that it was illegal. The guy didn't fully understand what she was talking about, but it was clear that he was in trouble, and so he stated that he had completed registration. He said he just left his license at home and asked me to wait a bit. He turned around and left, deciding that he would never return to this place again. At home, he found a resident registration card. It turned out that his name was now Kim Giryo. This was his new name. However, the hunter's license was nowhere to be seen, and the body was likely not registered. He found a pack of cigarettes and didn't understand what it was, or why it was scattered there. Taking them in his hands, he suddenly remembered that the previous owner of the body often smoked. He squeezed the pack in anger, because he was a heavy smoker, and for a magician, this is mortally harmful. Mages combine the body's internal energy with natural energy to use abilities. Simple question: which organ is used for this combination? Of course, the respiratory system, or more precisely, the lungs. Now, because of this idiot, he couldn't use magic. He didn't understand how it was possible to bring his own lungs to such a state. On Alfari, where almost the entire population is proficient in magic, this is simply unthinkable. He expected the locals to be primitive, but this sight amazed him. He took several deep breaths, trying to calm himself down. What's done can't be undone. And it's his own fault that he only looked at the magical power without taking into account the state of the body. He decided that he would definitely find a way to fix everything. In the end, he even escaped from captivity and had no intention of giving up. He was going to live the rest of his life in a new world for himself and make her happy. And so, after some time, he found himself at the police station, where the man said that he was not a child. So why did he do that? It took him 10 minutes to talk to strangers, after which the voice on both sides disappeared. The body began to tremble and saliva flowed from the mouth. There was a mountain of facts to learn about Earth, but first the problem of nutrient deficiency had to be solved. He suddenly stopped, sensing a delicious smell somewhere nearby, but he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. He saw a restaurant with a sign that said, Sanhee's Pork Soup. He went into the restaurant and they immediately brought him ready-made soup. The guy was happy to realize that the food had been right next to him all this time. He had just been making things harder for himself for no reason. He decided it was time to try it, and took a spoonful of soup into his mouth. It was a wonderful hot soup, delicious, mouth-watering, but he couldn't stop because he had already fallen in love with the local food. Everything was fine up until this point, And now the policeman was asking him if things were really that bad in their country, that he just ate his fill and ran away, even though he looked like a young guy. Kim Giryo began to make excuses, saying that he simply forgot to pay. Suddenly another policeman recognized him as a hunter. He let him go, telling him not to do it again, and this time he got off with a warning. But next time, he would definitely have to pay. Kim Giryo was about to leave, but the policeman stopped him and asked him to wait a second. He did some research and found out that Kim Giryo was not registered with the Hunters Association and may have recently awakened. The police officer kindly informed him that he should visit the testing center and that he didn't need to worry about money, since the procedure was free. As the boy was leaving, the man shouted at him to make sure he took the test. But Kim Giri didn't understand what kind of awakening this was. It turned out to be some kind of concept that the locals thought everyone on Earth should be familiar with. He thought that since they insisted so much, perhaps it was worth trying to go there. After some time, he stood in front of a huge, luxurious building, the Awakened Testing Center. It seemed that the previous owner of the body had already been in this place. The piece of paper he had written F rank was in line with the Awakened Testing Center's standards. He remembered that Kim Giryo was the lowest-ranking awakened one. Someone called him, saying that they had met again. Kim Giryo turned around and saw Sun Woo Yeon, who asked him what brought him to the association. She asked to see his documents if he had already come for a hunting license. Last time the guy lied to her. The memories returned in time and he apologized, admitting that last time he simply panicked and said nonsense. In fact, he didn't have a license, and the girl replied that she had been wondering why he hadn't returned. Kim Giryo said that he registered the awakening but did not receive the documents because the result was a complete disappointment. He admitted that his rank is F. Sun Woo Yeon was shocked because at such a rank, he was somehow able to catch a rookie killer. He explained that the stupid bird had crashed into the wall itself. The girl remembered that there were such cases when monsters could not adapt to the new environment and died. But when she first saw the guy, he looked so relaxed, as if he had already killed 100 of these monsters and did not feel any fear at all. She began to wonder why he was hiding his rank, since usually such people were involved in illegal activities. She fully admitted that he was one of those. The girl said that they were just lucky, because the rookie killer was known for his low intelligence. As far as the guy understood, on Earth it was not customary to express emotions with facial expressions, and he needed to learn this in order to seem friendlier. He began to use facial expressions and tried to portray joy. A crazy smile appeared on his face, and he said that he was very lucky. Song Woo Yeon was very surprised, not understanding what kind of expression he had on his face, and thought that he was too suspicious. She decided to leave and said that she had forgotten to give him something, asking him to remind her of his name. Hearing the name, she handed him the money and asked him to take it. Kim Giryo thought that perhaps this was a greeting gesture in this culture and asked why she gave him money. The girl explained that he left the body of the rookie killer behind, and she had to deal with it. And that was his lot. The boy remembered that the cost of the soup he had eaten was 8,000 won, and realized that this bill was equal to 6 bowls. He didn't expect the bird to be so expensive and asked if it had valuable feathers. The girl replied that the rookie killer's corpse was not of high value, but they were lucky to find a magic stone in it. F-ranked stones usually sell for 2 million won, but he only received 50,000. The girl explained that during the capture, damage was caused to the city, including the road and overpass, and she had to resolve everything on her own behalf. If the hunter involved had not fled, they would have been able to take advantage of legal immunity. Sun Woo Yeon said she had to go, wished them a good day, and left. The boy squeezed the bill in his hand and remembered the amount of 2 million won. In its normal state, such a bird would be no more dangerous than a common bug. Now, for one broken neck, he could get the equivalent of 75 bowls of soup. To survive, you need money, and he came to Earth in search of a happy life, which means he needs to earn money. So he decided it was time for him to become a hunter. Until lunch, his future seemed bleak, since the body's previous owner was a beggar, taking out his savings for one bowl of soup. But now everything has changed, because he realized that hunters earn decent money. This meant that he would be able to feed himself with what he did best. magic. Even if it wasn't working right now, he began to think where he could find enough monsters, and suddenly noticed a gate. People crowded around, taking pictures and filming, because it was the first time they had seen the gates in person. There were mountains of ruined buildings all around, and a glowing purple portal that was guarded. These were hunting locations, divided by rank depending on the density of magical energy. Along with this, the power of the monsters living inside also grew. Kim Giryo sensed an unusual sample of mana. He became curious about whether there were monsters there and decided to check it out. It was impossible to enter in front of such a crowd, and he wondered if there were any other gates nearby. He felt a magical beam and realized that there was another gate somewhere nearby. He went deep into the forest and realized that he was tired as he climbed. Climbing over the fenced tapes, he did not understand why people had hung them here. Deciding that Earthlings had a strange sense of aesthetics, he wondered why they were decorating the plants with ribbons and stood in front of the portal. After some time, other people appeared near the gate. One of the men called the manager and said they were there. On the other end of the line, he was asked if there were any civilians in the area. The man replied that there was no one there and that the tapes were also in place. The manager complained that the mutations would drive him crazy because he had already lost count of how many times the ranks had changed in a month. The man reassured him, promising that they would immediately begin an investigation. He hung up and told his comrades to go ahead. They went deep into the cave and smelled a terrible stench, which is not surprising in the middle of summer. The man noted that the density of magic was at the level of a D-rank dungeon. Another hunter replied that they were already used to it. As soon as something happened, the gate rank jumped sharply. He suggested that we sort this out quickly and have a drink afterwards. The man asked them to slow down because they were walking too fast, although the others did not understand why. He explains that they have already gone quite far, but there are no signs of monsters in this place. The guy is surprised, saying, "He's so young, so why is he so afraid?" After all, the team includes Yun Seung, an A-rank hunter, so what's the point in being afraid? But at that moment, the man notices how a huge monster appears behind his comrade and raises his hands to strike. At this time, Kim Giryo was walking through the same cave, and it seemed strange to him that he had already gone quite deep. He wondered if he had made a mistake in the design of this gate, since the monsters had not yet appeared. Suddenly he noticed a bright beam in his hand, which showed him the direction. His eyes suddenly glowed with a soft blue light, and he immediately knew it was mana. Although her flow was small and rough, it clearly contained vital energy, and it appeared to belong to a human. As he moved towards the beam of light, he realized that someone else had entered the gate without him noticing. Carefully peering out from behind the massive rock, he began to carefully observe what was happening ahead. Before his eyes appeared 3 people standing in front of a huge stone golem. The golem, frozen motionless, stared intently at the intruders, and his entire massive arm was spattered with blood. A little further away, right on the ground, the body of a young man lay motionless. His comrades were in complete shock that their partner was killed with just one blow, because it seemed simply impossible. The commander ordered them not to panic and to come to their senses, noting that if they did not pull themselves together, they would also be gone. But at that moment, someone called out to Yun Seung and warned him of an attack from behind. A huge stone fist was already flying towards him, but the man managed to stop it with a magic shield. He held off the blow for a few seconds, his shield glowing blue. Then he hit the ground with his shield, which immediately cracked, and a beam shot up. After that, he managed to dodge the monster's next attack with difficulty, but he instantly jumped high up, leaving the impact zone. While in mid-air, he activated a powerful blue beam that, with a bright flash of light, fell directly on the enemy, breaking through his defense. Giryo watched this entire fierce battle with great interest and attention, trying not to miss a single detail of what was happening. The victory did not come easy. The man was exhausted, fell to the floor, and, breathing heavily, sat next to the defeated monster, looking at him with relief. The comrade noted that he had, as expected, an emphasis on defense, but rank A remains A, even against such a giant. Yun Seung said that they need to take Cheol-min's body and leave. But suddenly, the monster's head lying on the ground came to life and its eyes lit up. The man didn't even have time to properly react to the attack before he was suddenly grabbed by the monster's powerful stone hands. The monster, as if without a single scratch, appeared completely unharmed and furiously pinned the man to the ground. The man lost control of his body from the force of the impact with the rock, coughing up blood, and his eyes rolled back, showing how badly he was hurt. Then the monster lifted him up again, lightly, like a rag doll, and began to slowly squeeze the fist in which he held his body. After a few agonizing seconds, he mercilessly threw the man's limp body aside like an unnecessary object. His comrade, seeing this, immediately screamed in horror and rushed towards him, unable to contain his anxiety and pain for his friend. The monster picked up one of the huge stones and swung it to hit the man, but he managed to react and cut the stone in half, avoiding injury. After that, he approached the monster and began to strike with his sword. But it broke. Then the monster pushed him, and the guy flew down. The girl was left alone against the monster, and her comrades lay unconscious. She was afraid to even turn around, but she felt the presence of a huge monster behind her. A few seconds later, he raised his fist, which flew towards the girl, who tried to defend herself with her hands. Suddenly, Yun Sung appeared in front of her and covered her with his shield. He was covered in blood and was holding on with all his might. He ordered her to use binding magic right now. If they don't defeat the monster, they won't get out of here alive. He warned that otherwise the entire team would be destroyed and asked her to hurry. Turning around, he saw that the girl was simply running away. He was genuinely surprised by her actions and could not understand why she suddenly ran away at such a dangerous moment. Did she really decide to abandon her team and run away, leaving them to their fate in the midst of battle? He thought about Chol Min, who had already died, and he understood that betraying a comrade in such a situation was simply unacceptable. Despite his despair, he continued to hold on to the monster, hoping until the very end, and at the same time begging her not to leave and not to abandon them. However, the monster turned out to be much stronger than he expected, and with a powerful blow of its fist, it pinned him to the ground, not giving him a chance to defend himself. In the last seconds of his life, he felt no rage at the betrayal, only a bitter and devastating emptiness inside. He received an A-rank awakening during the dungeon breakthrough phenomenon and began receiving offers from major guilds. He met good people, assembled a team, and achieved good results. Everything went smoothly, but everything he had strived for, all his efforts and dreams, ended up in such a miserable, inglorious, and unfair way, as if his life meant nothing. And suddenly, completely unexpectedly, a small stone flew at the huge monster, breaking the silence and attracting attention. Kim Giryo stood nearby and said how disgusting this sight was. He wondered if betrayal was part of human nature. At least he analyzed the situation. He noted that up close, it was obvious that the monster's model was damn outdated, although that didn't matter. Despite everything, he was glad of this meeting. Golem is a stone doll that moves using mana. On Alfara, they performed a wide variety of functions, from everyday tasks, construction work, and other assignments to combat vehicles. These creations played a major role in the formation of their nation, and Kim Girya doesn't even have a degree in combat golem research. There are no monsters left here because this guy is guarding it like the gate is private property. If the Guardian has already awakened, it will be almost impossible to leave this place quietly and unhindered. It looks like Kim Giryo himself will have to intervene and resolve this situation. He lacks the ability to use magic, but fortunately, he always has a backup plan. The golem quickly rushes towards the guy, trying to grab him with its huge hand, but he deftly dodges. Immediately after this, a clenched stone fist flies towards him with force, but Kim Giryo skillfully parries the blow. The enemy then unleashes a hail of rocks, but even that is unable to stop Kim. Despite his confident words at the beginning, everything turned out to be much more complicated than it seemed. He manages to dodge the attacks only because the golem is too large and moves clumsily. But Kim's physical capabilities are too limited for a long fight. And when the monster attacks again, the guy barely manages to dodge the new blow. At this tense moment, Kim Girya suddenly notices a massive purple stone on the golem's hand. Another attack from the monster, but it's all useless. After that, he wants to crush his opponent with his hand, but only hits it on the ground, and the guy jumps back. Near the wall, he falls to the ground and tries to catch his breath. The golem at this time tries to get his hand, which is stuck in the ground. The guy notices something and realizes that this is what he was looking for. The golem is easy to stop. The huge stone in his hand is not just a decoration, but a sensor for recognizing magical power. It is enough to send an emergency stop command to the sensor. From a safety point of view, only the owner or creator of the golem can do this. The diagram of this crude and old model can be understood at a glance. Kim Giryo casts a spell near the stone and a blue beam appears around his hand. After this, the lights on the golem's eyes and forehead begin to glow red, and the monster falls forward with a crash, face down on the ground, making a loud and sharp sound. However, the emergency stop command is not able to completely immobilize this creature. To completely disable the golem, you need to get to its main core, located on its back. After this, the core must be carefully removed, otherwise the mechanism may be activated again. Kim Giryo is reluctant to climb up there without the right tools, but he simply has no other choice. He carefully lifts the heavy stone slab, and at that moment, his face is flooded with bright light. Under this slab, he discovers a core, glowing blue and braided with many wires. He fiddles around inside the mechanism for a while, and then decisively rips out the core, breaking all connections. He looks at the torn object in his hand and says with relief that he dealt with it surprisingly easily. At this time, Yun-sung is still lying unconscious on the floor, covered in blood. But suddenly his fingers move slightly, and he begins to move his hand a little. He remembers how in the past his mother said that she understood his desire to become a hunter, but did he understand the risk? Then he told her not to worry. He might not look like much, but he was an A rank. The mother replied that this did not change her words. Of course, she wants to respect his choice, but if something goes wrong, she will not forgive herself. Yun-seung took the woman's hands and said that he would become a famous hunter, and she should not worry. He promised her with all his heart that he would definitely succeed. Then he told his mother to believe in him at least this once, no matter what. After these words, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in silence. But suddenly, his mother called out to him. She smiled softly and asked him with concern in her voice to be careful at work, wherever he ended up. And now this guy was lying seriously wounded on the cold concrete floor, not fully realizing what had happened to him. Gritting his teeth and gathering his last strength, he pulled himself together and, despite the pain and trembling in his body, began to slowly rise. At that moment, his gaze fell on a dead golem and a completely unfamiliar guy, and he could not understand what happened here. That unknown person destroyed the monster without using weapons, as if with his bare hands. The guy couldn't figure out how the man ended up there because he clearly remembered that there was a warning tape at the entrance, and only then did he finally realize that a real hunter stood before him. Kim Giryo calmly threw away the extracted core and confidently walked towards him. Although Yun-seung tried to stand up, he still couldn't move normally due to weakness and pain. Suddenly, the guy stopped right in front of him and turned his gaze to him. He extended his hand and asked if he needed help. Yun-seung sat in the hospital and watched the news about himself, not understanding why the journalists wrote such headlines. After all, the text of this news itself did not contain a single word of what was stated in the headline. The guy sitting opposite him asked in surprise how he could be unhappy. He understood that the golem had been defeated by another hunter, but he couldn't even name him. If he was stronger than Yun-seung, he couldn't be unknown. Even from his description, no one recognized this man, which may mean that he is not a registered hunter at all. Let the journalist's attention be focused on the A-rank monster, not the rescued hunter. The manager explained that all this was being done solely for the benefit of Yun-seung, since he could harm his career. If an A-rank hunter shows weakness, he will immediately become a target for others. Then why not just say that he was the one who defeated the golem? Yun-seung apologized and explained that it was more important to him to remain honest. It was the least he could do to thank that hunter. He didn't look like a man who would be involved in anything illegal. He was sure of this, because if things had been different, he would not have let him go alive. He was a good man to whom he was now indebted. The manager adjusted his glasses and said that he understood everything, and since Yun-seung insisted, Then everything would remain that way. Then he said the boy could go. Left alone, the manager began to think about the hunter who so easily killed the golem that even Yun Sung couldn't handle. If there really was a hunter with such a character, he would like to meet him at least once. At this time, Kim Giryo was sitting at home and looking at his phone. There was delight in his eyes, and he admiringly called the Earthlings amazing. Last night, he accidentally unlocked his smartphone, and since then, he hasn't let it out of his hands until dawn. Information was freely available even to those who belonged to the underprivileged class. Thanks to this, he collected a huge amount of information and began to wonder if he had really gone to heaven. The first gate he visited was not private property, and the second, all gates had entry restrictions. Korea was a country that took control of all awakened ones, and even visiting the gates required permission. MANHUA, for short, became the licensing agency in Korea. Third, Yun Seung was not a thief who tried to rob someone else's gate. Kim Giryo concluded that he needed to obtain a hunting license. The girl said that they had completed theoretical courses on gate safety and asked everyone to wait a little while they were given their devices. Kim Gi-rae stood in the crowd, bored, thinking that this entire lecture could be summed up in the words, "Just don't be idiots." A guy came up to him, handed him the device, and asked to undergo training. Kim Giryo looked at the screen and didn't understand what it was, because it didn't look like a license at all, and the man was surprised that he didn't know what it was. Everyone around was in shock. Could this man really have spent his whole life in a cave and just fallen to them from the moon? Kim Giryo realized that people were beginning to suspect something. The man explained that it was a basic analyzer that used pixie glass technology, and he would now explain how to use it. The girl who was giving the lecture asked if everyone had received analyzers and suggested trying to point the lens at these monsters. Huge purple butterflies were flying around the people. These butterflies were poisonous, and their danger level was designated as F. Earthlings do not use devices to identify enemies. The man said that the analyzer can identify not only monsters, but also has an item search function. He added that this device would help find valuable resources and suggested that the guy look around and try it. Kim Giryo pointed the screen at the man who was trying to stop the people from provoking the creatures, but the device said that there was no useful data. It does not work on people. He pointed the device at an ordinary fruit, and it reported that it was a fruit-bearing plant with red flesh and lots of fibers. Now the guy understood how the object analysis function worked, which meant that this device should also recognize objects. He pointed the analyzer at his own shadow, and the table showed that no useful data had been found. Kim Giryo couldn't understand how this was possible, since it was supposed to analyze valuable resources. Why didn't it recognize them? Then he realized that this device could only detect objects that contained mana. It turns out that the value of any resource is determined solely by the presence of magical energy in it. This is certainly a convenient and simple method, but it is very lacking in precision, because there are plenty of useful resources around that do not contain mana. The soil is a striking example of this because at first glance it is completely unremarkable. But in reality, it is an absorbent, a rare substance designed to absorb mana. It seems that no one here even knows that such magic exists, and this seems strange to him. In a world where magical research was even slightly advanced, it would be impossible not to notice absorbance. Why don't they know about it yet? After that, he thought of something, approached the man, and said that he had a question. He asked for a hint as to when the awakened ones began to appear in Korea. The man explained that this happened 7 years ago. Then, the discovery of the dungeons came as a real shock, and it was from that moment that the awakened began to appear all over the world. Kim Giryo was shocked that only 7 years had passed, as this was an incredibly short time. The history of magic on Alpha goes back 60,000 years, and now it became clear to him that all this time he had been surrounded by a primitive species. That's why all their electronics run exclusively on electricity, and he found that very strange. Their research into magic is at a primitive level, but they have compensated for this deficiency with technologies that are not up to their level of knowledge. Be that as it may, he can use absorbance that no one here has even heard of. The profession of a hunter can bring in hundreds of millions if you really try. In fact, Media fantasies often have nothing to do with reality, because low-ranking hunters live in a real hell. Does Kim Giri have problems with one leg? His new body can't even use magic. Before he found himself on the brink of starvation again, he had to find new ways to earn money. He took a lot of absorbent with him, hoping to use it for the cause. From his observations, there are monsters on Earth that can be killed with this substance, but the problem is that they live in high-ranking gates, and with rank F, he simply cannot enter there. It would be difficult for him to start a business based on magic and mana absorption when he knew so little about the planet, and his body was weak. Nothing but problems. Suddenly his phone beeped, and the guy got scared because he received a notification. This was an emergency notification of an A-rank monster appearing, and an evacuation would be announced once its direction of travel was confirmed. The guy was very surprised. What other evacuation could there be? He didn't really understand what was happening, but he really wanted to see it with his own eyes. All the people started to run away from the place because there was a breakthrough in the dungeon. Someone in the crowd said that the A-rank monster was very big. Kim Giri looked to the side and saw a huge creature sitting on the tower that looked like a mix of a dinosaur, dragon, lizard, and mammal. Suddenly, a man with a camera pushed him, apologized, and asked to let him pass. Kim Giri immediately fell to the floor, and the man did not understand what was wrong with him since he had barely touched him, and said that there was no need to make a scene. He added that Kim Giri had a strange face and asked if he was asking for trouble. Kim Giri couldn't understand what kind of nonsense he was talking about, since he had just come to observe. The man stated that he was, by the way, a hunter, and unlike Kim Giri, he did not bow down next to monsters in the hope of awakening, but conducted research and worked. Kim Giri said that he was also a hunter, and had come for the same reason, but the man asked what his rank was. The guy with a sad face replied that his rank was F. The man immediately couldn't contain his emotions and started laughing right in my face. Kim Giri didn't understand what was happening now. Was it really possible that they were laughing at him? At this time, several helicopters flew to the tower, trying to do something with the monster. Noticing that he was approaching the civilians, they were ordered to open fire. However, the bullets did not hit the monster, but only bounced off its thick scales. One of the helicopters soon exploded, caught fire, and began to fall. The same thing happened to the rest. They were already lying on the ground and burning. At that moment, a squad of hunters arrived, and among them was Yun Seung. The monster standing on the building began to break glass to get inside where the frightened people were hiding. He managed to break the window, stick his head in, and he stuck his tongue out, capturing several people. He was about to eat them while the victims were screaming, but then someone ran up and cut out his tongue. The monster screamed in pain, and the people, having slipped out of the trap, began to fall down. Yun Seung announced that the monster was trying to escape under the tower. The girl standing next to him took a bow and arrows and began to aim, and fire flared up around her. She fired several arrows, and they hit the monster's tail precisely. The monster then dropped its tail to leave, leaving him behind. With a huge noise, he began to descend the building, breaking it as he went. At that moment, Yun Seung activated his shield and fired a wave of magic at the monster. Kim Giri was greatly surprised when the monster began to fall, but instead hit a building. Yun Seung moved down towards the lizard and dealt it several more powerful blows. In the end, the monster lay on the floor, crippled, bruised, and burnt. People screamed with joy because the hunters managed to kill this huge monster. Everyone started calling out to Yun Seung for an autograph, and his comrades started approaching the crowd. Giri's search bore fruit. He realized that A-rank hunters make up the elite 3% of all awakened. These hunters made a huge contribution to the protection of humanity and became universal idols. That's why everyone was so excited, and people were pushing Kim Giri, addressing the hunter. Some even recognized him from TV. Kim Giri met Yun Seung face-to-face and greeted him. The boy grabbed his hand, happy to see him, and said that he owed him his life. Yun Seung may have forgotten him, but he's the guy Kim Giri pulled out of the dungeon after he crushed the golem. Kim Giri now understood why this hunter seemed so familiar to him. Everyone started asking Yun Seung if this guy was a member of their group. The man next to him noticed the hunter staring at Kim Gi-rae. But if he were him, he would have been staring too. After that, he turned to Kim Gi-rae and said that he would like to introduce himself since he had the chance. He gave his name as Yoon Seung-ah. Then he asked if he could find out the name of his savior. He replied that his name was Kim Gi-rae. Then Yoon Seung-ah asked if he had some free time and handed him his card. It was already late in the evening when they were sitting together on a bench, and Yoon Seung was saying that perhaps Kim Gi-rae didn't need it, but he wanted to repay him and asked if there was any way. He felt uneasy all this time after his disappearance because the guy saved his life. Kim Gi-rae then simply ran away to avoid being caught by the police. It would be a waste to refuse the help of an A-rank hunter. Then Kim Gi-rae said that he had an idea, and Yoon Seung was delighted, saying that he was at his service. Kim Gi-rae took out his phone and showed him the screen where a map with a marked location was turned on. He asked him if the boy could go with him to the gate. Together they came to a creepy, dark forest, and Kim Gi-rae asked his comrade what was wrong, why he had such a thoughtful expression on his face. He replied that everything was fine, and then they decided that they needed to speed up a little. Yoon Seung couldn't believe it, no matter how much he thought about it. How can such an amazing hunter be an F rank? A little earlier, Yoon Seung had said that it was a great honor for him to enter the gate with such a hunter, and asked if he was really going to look for materials there. Kim Gi-rae said it would be a monster hunt, and the boy was happy that he could learn a few tricks from him. Kim Gi-rae exhaled and said that they needed to clarify something since there was a misunderstanding between them. Yoon Seung was surprised and didn't understand what he was talking about. Kim Gi-rae showed his license and admitted that he was an F-rank hunter. To get permission, he registered as a porter. Yoon Seung couldn't believe that he had such a low rank, but he seemed to have heard something like that before. Medium and strong hunters are forced to suppress dungeon breakouts. That's why there are rumors about people hiding their true rank to avoid pressure from the association. Yoon Seung thought that his partner was also hiding his rank. Kim Gi-rae stopped and said that he found the place on the internet, and it looked exactly the same. A lava swamp with one-eyed bats flying around. Yoon Seung recognized these monsters as flamethrowers, and a translation error occurred in the analyzer some time ago. These monsters were originally discovered in a gayo. It was a bat engulfed in flames, and they wanted to introduce it into the Pixie system as a fire bat. But due to a translation error, the name was adapted to flamethrowers. Suddenly, the lava rose up like a geyser and bats flew out of it towards the boys. They began to fly in circles above them, like a hurricane. When Kim Gi-rae took something out of his bag, his friend admitted that he had long wanted to know what he was carrying in it. But suddenly, a multitude of bats flew towards them, opening their mouths to attack them. A handful of earth at them. After this, the monsters began to scream, burn, and fall to the ground. Kim Gi-rae said that there is an item in the bag that is perfect for such situations, and its effectiveness is guaranteed. Yoon Seung said that he didn't want to distract him from hunting, and the boy replied that it was okay. He was listening. He asked why he needed to use any items when he could catch F-rank monsters with his bare hands. Kim Gi-rae couldn't understand whether his comrade hadn't read his license carefully. Perhaps from the top of rank A, it was impossible to see how hard it was for the low-ranking hunters, but he didn't want to show his weakness once again. And he asked Yoon Seung whether he had ever thought about the very nature of awakening. People are lifting one-ton trucks, filling parched land with water, and literally changing the environment. But these skills were not acquired through effort. They simply fell on them from the sky. If there was no reason for their appearance, then there is no need for a reason for their disappearance, and he considers all this undeserved. Therefore, he does not intend to rely solely on the abilities of the awakened. What are the chances that his partner will believe this crazy idea? Yoon Seung shed a tear and said that he was truly right. And why didn't he think about it himself? That which was obtained without any effort could disappear at any moment. And was he really naive in hoping that the skills would help him throughout his life? Dungeon mutations are becoming more and more unpredictable, so it's best to prepare for gates where you won't be able to use awakened skills. He was looking for easy ways to train, but the guy had foreseen everything. He wanted to ask if that was why he was here, but he immediately closed his mouth, and Kim Gi-rae couldn't understand what he was talking about. Yun Seung said that people with a high awakening level feel strength in their guts, and he gets goosebumps around S-rank hunters. But Kim Giri has almost no aura, like a fly. The guy was shocked by what he called the best magician of Alfori. Yun Seung said that his partner trained his power control so hard that he learned to hide his mana, and he had never seen anything like it in his life. And yet, this thought didn't make Kim Giri feel any better, because the rank of awakened people directly depends on the amount of mana. So be it. And he said that, roughly speaking, his comrade was right. And so they are sitting in a cafe, and Yun Seung asks the guy if he wants to go on a raid again. Will he take him with him? And he doesn't understand why, because the debt has already been repaid. And Yun Seung explained that there was a lot to learn from being around the guy, and in truth, his team had fallen apart due to the recent incident, and it hadn't even been half a year since he woke up. He himself is dangerously lacking in experience, and it is difficult to assemble a new team. Kim Giri-oh realized that he had not forgotten the betrayal of his comrades, and he could understand it. Since he himself is the one offering, he just has to remember that the guy won't save him if something happens. He has to protect himself, because Kim Giri has no way to cover for him. And in the worst case, their collaboration will only cause harm. Kim Giri-oh said that the problem with the golem was that it was in too much of a hurry. Yun Seung thought about how kind he was, and was afraid that he might get hurt if he relaxed around him. And then he said that he was interested to know the age of his new friend. Yun Seung said that for reference, he was 22 years old, but he was retaking the exam. Kim Giri-oh looked away and realized that he didn't know how old he was. Suddenly he took out his wallet and said that right, he almost forgot, and that they needed to exchange numbers. He showed him his passport, and Yun Seung saw that he was 24 years old. He was surprised that they were only 2 years apart. Then he apologized and said he didn't mean to be rude, but he thought he was being so calm and mature. Kim Giri-oh turned towards the students and realized that he had no memories of studying. There were no numbers on the phone. Who was the owner of this body? And what was his life like? The man was sitting on the couch in front of the TV, and there was news about the phenomenon of dungeon mutation, which was becoming more and more common. The Hunters Association said it could not explain the increase in cases in the country, and even top evaluators were unable to pinpoint a cause. For this reason, citizens' concerns began to grow. A few days later, Yun Seung called Kim Giri-oh and asked if he wanted to see something cool tomorrow since he had priority access to the new gate. Kim Giri-oh immediately agreed, because how could he refuse an offer that began with the words, "something cool"? In Korea, the new gate is only available to the research team. After the association checks, it is open to the rest, and today was the opening day. There were rumors that an unknown plant was found inside, and who knows, maybe it will be the key to restoring Giri-oh's magic. It had to be near the entrance, and he was going to check it out and leave. There were a lot of people gathered around, and he wondered if they were all going inside. Yun Seung replied that most of them were just onlookers and journalists, but he also didn't expect to see such a crowd. And then, not far from them, a red sports car pulled up. She immediately attracted the attention of all the people standing nearby. A man with graying hair got out of the car, and everyone recognized him as Kang Chang-ho. No one understood what he was doing there. Kim Giri-oh asked his friend who it was, and he replied that it was an S-rank hunter. He was one of only 3 hunters of that level in the entire country, and his name was known even to those far from the gate world. Kim Giri-oh immediately noticed that he emitted incredibly stable mana, and among ordinary people, he seemed like a rare, shining diamond. And suddenly, Kang Chan looked up and looked straight at the boy with his bright green eyes. Kim Giri-oh asked in surprise what was wrong with his eyes, and his comrade calmly explained that these were the eyes of a dragon, an incredibly rare magical item. And together they noticed that the man was walking confidently straight towards them. He came very close to Kim Giri-oh and calmly asked his name. At first the guy didn't understand what exactly the man wanted, but then he introduced himself, and then he was immediately asked about his rank. Yun Seung interrupted their conversation, greeting the hunter and saying that he was just his porter, nothing special, and asked what the man's business was with them. He angrily replied that he was not talking to Yun Seung. Kim Giri-oh was silent for a moment, and then admitted that he was an F rank. At this, Kang Chan laughed. Kim Girya thought he sensed his innate abundance of mana. The lungs are just an excretory organ, and even severe damage to them will not reduce the amount of mana in the body. Apparently, this magician is at such a level that he can sense the enemy's strength even from the smallest signals. He asked the man if he wanted the guy to show him his license. Kang Chang asked if he really meant to say that some F rank was able to talk and look an S rank straight in the eye, to which he said that Kim Giryo did not mind, but they were immediately interrupted by Yun Seung and said that it was time for them to go. They came to admire, but now it's time to leave, because if they don't go now, they will lose their reservation in the queue. Kim Giryo walked away and turned towards the man a couple of times, looking at him. Yun Seung asked him if he really didn't know who Kang Chang-ho was, if he lived in another country. And he replied that yes, he came from far away. The guy didn't want to seem like a gossip, but this hunter didn't have the best reputation. There was an attack case, and no one wants to enter the gate with a high-ranking criminal. Even if we forget about that case, the current rumors are also terrible. Kim Gi-rai asked what happened, and the boy replied that he had a cousin, Choi Jin, who was number 3 among the A ranks. She entered the same gate as Kang Chang-ho and was attacked by him, as he heard, because he loves to challenge strong awakened ones to battle. So Yun Seung dragged Kim Gi-ryo away from there to save him from S rank. What a cute mammal. He said, okay, they'll take a day off and look at this new plant tomorrow. And then he said that the guy mentioned that Kang Chan had some dragon eyes. These are objects, which means they can be exchanged. Yun Seung explained that yes, it was originally a small ball, and he thinks the man absorbed it to use it. They decided to check if there are dragon lungs, but they are not sold now, because lungs are not the most popular part of the body. But sooner or later, they will appear on the market. Unlike the eyes or heart, they don't increase the amount of mana. Even the liver has a special effect. It can be used to make medicine. And he found the listed price for the lungs, 2.6 billion. This made Kim Giryo very upset. And he was very surprised when he heard his partner say that it was cheap, because you can't buy other parts for that kind of money. Kim Giryo shed a tear and decided that he shouldn't ask about it. After that, he got into a taxi, which was driving slowly along the road. He looked up information about Kang Chang-ho on the internet, and the more he learned about him, the scarier he seemed to him. The guy couldn't believe that such psychos were walking the streets calmly. Maybe he should have avoided his gaze, in case it started to bother him now. A red car appeared on the road and hit the taxi in the trunk from behind. Kim Giryo was very scared, and the taxi driver barely managed to slow down to avoid an accident. He turned around, looked into the back seat, and asked the guy if he was okay. Kim Giryo lay between the seats and replied that everything was fine. The driver went outside, turned to the man sitting behind the wheel of the car, asked where he had bought his license, and then told him to get out of the car. Kang Chan got out of the car, apologized, and said that he hadn't driven for a long time and had confused the gas with the brake. Kim Giryo also got out of the car and realized who was standing in front of him. The man greeted him and said that he would like to quickly resolve everything and exchange contacts. Kim Gi-rai thought it was just a nightmare. How badly you have to drive to cause an accident on an empty road. The driver also understood who was standing in front of him, because it was a hunter, and said that paying for the repairs was enough, after which they handed him some bills. The man bowed and thanked him, and Kim Giryo became curious about how much money he had been given. Kang Chan handed over his phone and told the guy to write down his contact information. He gave him all the cash, and they would talk about the medical expenses later. Kim Giryo didn't understand what he was trying to say, because that's how Earthlings solve problems with accidents. And if all they needed was a number, then he didn't mind. And then he handed him his phone with his number. Kang Chan is the only son of a large company owner, a hunter who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he once earned a criminal record for assault before he was even awakened. Everyone thought that with so much money, he would hire a good lawyer and be able to avoid prison, but in the end, he ended up in prison. And there were many testimonies on the internet about how he attacked other people. But the biggest scandal was something else. His parents died during a dungeon breakthrough several years ago, and Chang-ho sold all the company shares immediately after the incident. which led to the liquidation of the family business. People began to spread rumors because the exact time of his awakening was not known, and some believed that Kang-chan killed his own parents for money, but this was not proven. The man said it was strange that a man like Giryo would spend his time working as a porter, and asked if he intended to continue looking after the chicken. He added that he could offer a job that paid very good money, and asked him if he was interested. Kim Giryo was happy when he heard that the job was well paid and said that he wouldn't mind listening. Kang-chan offered him to work for him instead of being Yun-sung's porter and receive 80% of the profits and items from the gate. Kim Giryo couldn't understand what kind of absurd conditions these were and whether he was joking. Giryo's massive mana reserves, and it was likely that the potential of this body exceeded even an S rank. When he regains the ability to use magic, this planet will come under his control. Kim Giryo said that he would hardly be able to enter the S rank gate, so it would be difficult for him to work with him. Kang-chan couldn't understand what he was saying. Considering his level, there was no way he would take him into a high-ranking dungeon. Kim Giryo asked if he hadn't approached him because of his awakening potential, but he replied that what potential, since he himself said that he was an F rank. He only offered to take him under his bloody wing, and, roughly speaking, he would become his sponsor. Kim Giryo apologized because it seemed like he had misunderstood the whole thing, and Kang-chan asked him if he agreed or not. Kim Giryo said he had only one question. What is his interest in this deal? Kang-chan just smiled predatorily and replied that, well, who knows? Later, Kim Giryo told Yun Sung-woo about the accident, and he was shocked. The guy explained that he quickly left, saying that he had an appointment, and in truth, he was almost certain that Kang-chan probably caused the accident. Yun Seung noted that he really seemed to be targeting strong hunters, and he himself had avoided trouble thanks to his friend, since even an A rank like him could become his target. But next to Kim Giryo, he doesn't stand out so much, and Kim Giryo didn't know what to do. Should he go to the police? But what will he tell them? Ask for help with the S-rank hunter who threatens to protect him and take 80% of all his prey. They decided not to make a big deal out of it, and Yun Seung interrupted his thoughts by asking his comrade if he had watched TV that morning. Last year, Korea ranked second in gate management, and while the mutation problem remains serious, the damage to the population has been greatly reduced. The news said that they would soon be able to overcome this disaster, and Kim Giryo noticed that his partner had a knack for picking the right topics. He himself was interested in the gate, which remains an unknown concept. 7 years ago, a mysterious phenomenon occurred on this planet. Gates, monsters, and awakened ones appeared. The principles of magic are based on the use of mana from the planet's core, and Earth differs from Alphoria in its hard rock, which prevents mana from reaching the surface. But the gates that appeared became something like wells or holes for mana to seep through, and some people were affected by them and became awakened. But the principle of the gates' operation was not very clear to him, because Earthlings did not create these strange spaces intentionally, and inside they are teeming with previously unseen creatures, extremely hostile monsters, and if this is not Earth or Alphorian technology, then whose is it? Yun Seung interrupted the boy's thoughts and asked if he was feeling unwell, and he replied that he was just thinking for a bit. He tried to put himself in the shoes of someone who could create all these gates, and he thought that he wouldn't like the current situation. The motives remained unknown, but the monsters had a clear goal: to kill people, and the magical items in this scheme were bait, just like cheese in a mousetrap. If mice one day learn to escape from a trap and take a piece of cheese with them, the world will definitely change for the worse. Wouldn't the man who set the mousetrap be angry to see his plan foiled in such a brazen manner? Yun Sung calmly noted that there was sense in what his interlocutor was saying and said that it all sounded quite logical and even plausible. And suddenly, they felt a strange vibration, as if energy was boiling right under their feet, reminiscent of bubbling lava. Around Kim Giryo, and Yun Sung asked him if something was wrong. Kim Giryo immediately realized that mana was beginning to gather around him, and at that very moment, his body seemed to be picked up by an invisible force and abruptly carried away, leaving him no chance to resist. Yun Seung rushed towards him in a panic and tried with all his might to hold on to his comrade, clinging to him with his hands, as if he hoped to snatch him from the clutches of this strange energy. But all his efforts were in vain, and he froze in place in complete shock, not understanding what exactly was happening right before his eyes. Suddenly, a blinding blue hurricane of pure magic spun in front of his face, picking up Kim Giri with a deafening roar and instantly carrying him away into the distance. Kim Girya felt like his body was trapped in a real magical trap, and he realized that the power of the gate was mercilessly pulling him inside. When he came to, he realized that he was lying on the cold floor of some strange white room, where everything around him looked unusual and alien. After looking around the room, he did not understand where he was, and thought that this was a gate. Meeting a strong monster in such a place would be tantamount to death, so it was necessary to get out. But how can he escape with a body that can't even use simple magic? And then he came to a statue of a lion and all sorts of stone arches. He noticed a stone tablet and realized that there was something written on it. But suddenly he heard some sound, turned around and saw a man. It was Kang Chan, who immediately recognized his friend. And on the other side, there was another guy whose name he didn't know. The three of them stood there, looking at each other, and no one understood what was happening. Kang Chan recognized the stranger as Chung Ha and told him that he hoped he would not return from Singapore for a long time. And Chung Ha replied that he had arrived today, and it seemed that they were close friends. Kim Giryo looked at them and asked if they knew each other. Kang Chan asked him if he didn't know Jung Ha Sun, but he remained silent, thinking that he had only recently arrived on Earth. And how could he know him? Kang Chan made fun of his friend because Kim Giryo doesn't know him and said that he should work harder on his media presence. He added that this was Jung Ha Seong, an S-rank hunter and also Korea's top ranker. Usually everyone calls him a national hero, but since Kim Giryo doesn't know, it's not scary. And he introduced him to Kim Giryo. He said it was nice to meet him, but the guy didn't understand why he was staring like that. Chung Ha said that they would leave the proper introduction for another time, since they too were suddenly drawn into this space. He pressed something on his watch-like device, and a sign appeared. Now it was safe to say that they were at the extra-rank gate, and they were in trouble. Kim Giryo picked up the phone and remembered what the extra rank was, because he had read something about it. But he saw that the entire screen was covered in terrible interference, and he didn't understand what was going on. Kang Chan said that he didn't bring a protective case either, and the phone would be damaged if they didn't get out quickly. Chung Ha noticed something written on the slab. The symbol of true faith will become the key. This was a hint for clearing the gate. He thought that now they could only go through this huge door in front of them. Chung Ha gathered all his strength, tensed every muscle and used magic, trying to move the heavy door, but it didn't even budge. Kang Chan noticed that the door remained motionless and heard his comrade ask for help in frustration. Chung Ha admitted that he couldn't open this massive passage alone. Kang Chan reluctantly gave in, said that he would help anyway, and assumed a fighting stance, preparing to use force. They looked at each other intently for a few seconds, exchanging silent signals, and then nodded and began to act simultaneously. After that, Chung Ha activated his firepower on the door, and it began to melt a little. Kang Chan also used his natural strength and hit the door. S-rank mages hold a special place among humanity, who are susceptible to the influence of mana. These are people endowed with exceptional talent and possessing monstrous abilities. But even they could not open the passage, and none of their magic helped. Kang Chan frowned and realized that no amount of brute force, even S-rank strength, would be able to open this massive gate. Kim Giryo slowly turned to face the stone lion, and noted that it seemed like they had another way to try to open the passage. Kang Chan looked closely at the lion's wide mouth, studying it as if trying to figure out the intentions of the creators of this gate. He chuckled and said that the mouth was just begging for someone to stick their hand in it. Kim Giryo watched him closely and didn't understand if he was joking, but he clearly understood that if they didn't open the door, they would be trapped in this place forever. Since they were drawn here unexpectedly, they did not even have basic supplies for survival. Chung Ha, displaying his usual fearlessness, resolutely approached the stone lion and slowly stuck his hand into its mouth. At that very second, the massive door shook and opened with a creak. When Young-ha pulled out his hand, Kim Giryo asked him if he was okay, and the man showed his hand with 2 holes from which blood was flowing and said that the statue had drunk his blood. This unexpected fight was hard. He tried to pull his hand out, but the statue squeezed it with a death grip, and for an instant he even thought about cutting it off. Kang-chan asked them if they had talked enough, since the passage had opened and they needed to go. Kim Giryo knew he had a bad feeling about this and wondered if they were being too rash. They calmly walked inside the room and saw the same long and empty white corridor in front of them. And in this corridor they unexpectedly came across another massive lion statue. Chung-ha walked forward decisively and said that they didn't have time to hang around in this place. He stuck his hand deep into the stone lion's mouth again and said that they needed to get out as quickly as possible. After this, the gates opened again, and they decided not to stop and move forward. Just a couple of minutes later, their path led to another lion statue and a new gate. Kim Giryo wondered if it was worth inserting his hand into the statue to open the gate, and if they were doing it right. Young-ha asked Kang-chan if he could open the door next time, since the amount of blood he absorbed changes. The first one was small, but the second one made him feel a little sick. If the required dose increases each time, it is better to do it one at a time, but Kang-chan said there have been no problems up to this point, and he asked why Chung-ha didn't finish them. The man said he could interpret this as a refusal to cooperate. Kang-chan replied that he had not forgotten that they were of the same rank. Chung-ha said that he didn't care much, and added that this was the last time Hunter Kang-chan had to cooperate. He asked what would happen if he refused. If they continue to open the doors one by one, there is a risk that someone will come across the very statue that will suck all the blood dry. Chung-ha said that he should at least decide when he does it, it will be fairer that way. Kang-chan said that there was another hunter with them and suggested asking him about it. The survival rate in extra-rank gates is around 60%, and they are often free of monsters, but that doesn't mean they are safe. The labyrinth, which could only be entered after an offering of blood, had openings that could only accommodate one hand. In other words, this walkthrough required the sacrifice of one of the team members, and it looks like Kim Giryo got into big trouble. Chung-ha asked his comrade if he was serious about pushing the work onto an F rank when there were 2 S ranks here. Suddenly, everyone heard some sound, turned around and looked to the side. A dark wolf with red eyes and huge claws was heading towards them. Kim Giryo was very surprised that there were also monsters roaming around in this gate, and at that very second, the wolf growled and rushed towards the guy. He didn't know what to do and just covered himself with his hands. And at that moment, Chung-ha took his sword and flew towards him. He used the power of fire and cut the wolf in half, and it also burned to ashes. Kim Giryo saw all this and realized that fire from empty air was their primordial magic. And then he thought that Kang-chan's skills must be of the same high level. And then he noticed that another wolf of the same type was already running towards him. But Kang-chan was standing in front of him, so the animal jumped over the man. His eyes glowed green. He turned around and killed the creature with one blow. This crazy power of his awakening gave him physical enhancement. Kang-chan said that the monster was not as tough as he thought, and was more like a C-rank monster. Chung-ha said that it was too early to relax, and that he needed to look somewhere. They looked at the wall where wolves were drawn in black ink. And from these drawings emerged numerous wild wolves. In just a couple of seconds, there were already more than 1,000 of them, and they surrounded the guys from all sides. Chung-ha said that they are not too strong, but fighting a huge pack could be a problem. He told Kang-chan to take the ones from behind, but he replied that the guy should think better of himself. Several wolves jumped into the air and flew to attack from above. Kang-chan killed several wolves with his green magic and bare hands. Chung-ha at this time swung his sword and firepower, also killing part of the pack. Kang-chan used another punch, and a huge green beam shot out from his fist, killing many animals. As the wolves ran towards Chung-ha, he swung his sword at great speed, delivering numerous blows. Kim Giryo watched their battle and understood what S-rank people were worth. There were even more wolves than it seemed, and due to the loss of blood, Chung-ha felt weak. At this rate, his strength would not last long, and he, breathing heavily, looked up at the massive lion statue standing nearby. He noticed that the stone beast's eyes were glowing ominously with a scarlet light, and fresh blood had already accumulated in its mouth, as if the statue had drunk its fill of the victim. At that moment, the guy understood everything, and suddenly, another dark wolf with a bared mouth jumped out of the shadows behind him. He turned sharply, gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands, and with one swift, practiced movement, cut the beast in two. Taking a breath, he said that he thought he finally understood what was going on here. Kang-chan kills a few more wolves and notices how many of these creatures there were. Kim Giryo now has a rough understanding of the power of the S ranks. They destroyed a huge flock of monsters in an instant. Perhaps taking over Earth even after the return of magic will not be so easy. Chung-ha turns to his comrades and asks them to look at the lion. He notices that the statue's eyes are shining. It seems that this gate has a time limit, after which monsters will appear if you don't give blood. Suddenly, another monster emerges from the wall, from the drawing. Young-ha tries to explain his suspicions, but Kim Gi-ryo yells at him to turn around. In the blink of an eye, he draws his sword and pierces the wolf completely. Kang-chan asks if they've wasted too much time. Many more dangerous dark wolves immediately emerge from the wall. Kim Gi-ryo stands there, frightened, covering himself with his hands, not knowing what to do. Young-ha yells at him and runs towards him with a sword. At this time, Kang-chan rushes towards the lion statue. Chung-ha is great at levitating in space, cutting wolves into pieces. Kang-chan pushes through the pack and sticks his hand into the statue. After she absorbs the boy's blood, the wolves scatter in all directions. Only black traces remain, and the next gate opens. Kim Giryo is surprised because he thought that the guy would be the last one to want to help, and decides that they will do it in turns. They don't know if an EF rank body can withstand such a load, and now it's clear why he is called a national hero. Young-ha immediately excluded Kim Girye from the sacrifice list when he learned that he was of such a low rank and protects him from the monsters. Thanks to this, he can pass without shedding a drop of blood, and he even feels guilty. And together, they move on. Young-ha suddenly starts breathing heavily, sweating, and feeling unwell, and Kim Gi-ryo asks if he's okay. He replies that yes, because such sudden gates are usually small, and they think that they are almost out, although his face turns pale. Kim Gi-rai realizes that it's lucky that it's Kang-chan's turn, but he suddenly stops them. He says they have no guarantee that there will be a way out behind these doors, and their strength is already running out. Perhaps they missed a clue, and he suggests going back and checking the last room. Chung-ha thinks that he is just stalling for time, because this is a standard scenario for X gates, and he knows it very well. He plans to attack him during the battle with the monsters, just like he did with Choi Jin. Young-ha tells him to stop stalling and open the doors. Kang-chan says he'll open it now, and asks why the guy is so gentle, since he doesn't give up on his strategy. It seems like he doesn't know everything about the Choi Jin incident, since he's not a psychopath who blindly attacks his comrades. It is difficult to understand a person with a criminal past, and trust is hard to come by. But he thinks that Chung-ha is overdoing it and puts his hands on the lion's head. He also wants to get out of here, but his partner is in too much of a hurry. He puts his hand in the lion's mouth and says that the door is open and that Young-ha needs to think about his words because Kang-cha would have suggested going back even if it wasn't his turn. Kim Gi-rai thinks that this guy seems more sane than he thought. But rumors don't just appear out of thin air. Kang-chan struggles to pull his hand out of the statue, and his partner asks if he's okay. Kang-chan replies that there is no need to worry about him because he has potions, and they will be enough for a couple more doors. Chung-ha says that they need to move on, and if there is no exit in the next room, they will look for other options. Kim Gi-rai thinks that he might have to support Kang-chan. Suddenly, Kang-chan takes out a bottle of potion and swings it at Young-ha. He hits him on the head with one blow, the bottle breaks, and everything flies apart. Chung-ha can't stand it and immediately falls unconscious. Kang-chan is surprised that it worked even at the S rank, and Kim Girya sees this and understands that the guy is completely inadequate. He asks him why he is doing this at all. Kang-chan asks if he has heard of the Iron Maiden Gate that appeared in Northern Europe. They are of the same format, where you can only escape after the sacrifice of one hunter. Kim Girya is shocked that the man wants to sacrifice Jung Ha, and he says that it is enough to look at the statistics. The survival rate in the X-Gate is always around 60%, regardless of the rank of the hunter. He doesn't want to bet his life on such a low chance, and he's trying to make sure they get out. Kim Girya thinks there is some logic to his words. They will indeed need a scapegoat if the dungeon requires a sacrifice, and he would prefer one of them, but is not in a position to choose. It remains to follow the S-rank plan. But why did he knock out his partner and not Kim Giryo? He understands that something is wrong here. Kang-chan brings his comrade's hand to the pedestal, but he is stopped. Kim Gi-rai says he will open the door himself and asks him to let Jung Ha go, and the man laughs and asks if he has really gained confidence and tells him to just shut up. He will do everything himself. This is the only way he will stay alive, and Kim Giryo understands that it will not be possible to reach an agreement. He wonders how he can save Jung Ha, and Kang-chan says that the test will soon end, judging by the amount of blood. He doesn't have time to do anything, but suddenly the gates in front of them open by themselves. There is a statue of a beautiful woman there. They are surprised when they see the exit. Did it really end that simply? This can't be, because there is only one Iron Maiden left and statistics. Their attention is drawn to a fountain, in the middle of which stands a girl holding a gold bracelet in her hands. Kang-chan can't believe he's hallucinating, because he was sure they would need a sacrifice, so he chose Jung Ha. If he wakes up, he will be very unhappy and will have problems. Kim Girya notices that the statue has an award and picks up the gold bracelet. The bracelet has angels on it, and he realizes it is a magical item. It comes in handy when Kang-chan apologizes to his partner, but his partner says that attacking the best hunter in the country is not something that can be resolved so easily. The association will not stand idle, and it would be much easier if he played the role of the victim. Before they get out, maybe it's worth killing him here, in the gate. The body disappears along with the dungeon, and the only problem is the witnesses. He doesn't think Kim Giryo will have a reason to remain silent about the murder. Kim Gi-rai asks if he really wants to kill him and his partner, but the man laughs and says he has no intention of doing so. He grabs him by the shoulder and with a heavy expression asks him to say that it was he who knocked out Jung Ha-sung. Kang Chang-ho has extraordinary vision. It's all thanks to an item obtained from an A-rank green dragon, called Dragon Eyes. These eyes have many functions. Clear vision allows you to see well at long distances and increases the amount of mana. The eyes also give the ability to measure the level of awakening with one glance. With eyes like that, he can see any detail, so he never frowned until now. Kim Giryo had never seen such a strange formula for magical power. The amount was not very large. Perhaps this guy has acquired a special skill that is sought after by hunters all over the world. When Kang-chan asked him his rank and heard the answer, he realized that the guy was a liar. If he were an ordinary F rank, he would never be able to look him in the eye. To ordinary people or low-level awakened ones, they look like huge beasts. Even a simple trip to the store turns into an ordeal for Kang-chan. The fact that Hunter Kim Giri is an F rank is just nonsense, so Kang-chan became interested in him and decided to provoke him. Whether it was a sudden accident or an offer of 100 million won, there was no emotion on his face. He has the courage to disdain the S rank. These were the thoughts of Kang-chan, a man who had been accustomed to attention since childhood. This indifference seemed extremely pleasant to him. It was not at all because Kim Giryo irritated him. Kang-chan asks the guy to take the blame, because Jung Ha won't be able to prove anything even if they remember something. The testimony of the attackers will be given priority. All the guy needs to say is the following. The conflict between the hunters was growing, so he had to calm Chung Ha down. If he refuses, Kang-chan will take the guy with him to the bottom. Frankly, he could solve all the problems right here, but he is curious about what abilities Kim Giryo is hiding. He will definitely react to such a stupid threat, and suddenly Kim Giryo agrees. He asks if it's enough to say that he knocked out Jung Ha, and the man is surprised that he agreed so easily. Kang-chan sees that there is still no fear on the boy's face, and it doesn't look like he is scared of a threat. Is he trying to avoid any conflict? By the way, before this, he said that he couldn't go to the S-rank gate now, which means he had already done this in the past. Kim Girya is really a high-ranking awakened who deliberately lowered his magical power to the level of an insect. It's as if he deliberately chained himself up. And because of this, Kang-chan has no idea what kind of power he has awakened. Why drop the awakening rating so low? He could have dug a little more. But they decide that's enough for today, and he tells the guy that it's time to get out of the dungeon. Kim Giryo thinks that he barely survived now. It's just a miracle. Kang-chan takes Jung-ha on his shoulder, and the three of them leave the dungeon. Kim Girya emerges from the portal and is glad that they are outside, closing her eyes from the blinding sun. He sees that the portal is closed with tape and guarded, but there are journalists standing there, rejoicing that a hunter has finally appeared at the exit. Kim Giryo looks at all this and doesn't understand why there are so many people here. The journalists ask to look into the camera, congratulate the survivor, and ask if he can tell what kind of gate it was. Someone rushed forward and asked about other survivors and how many hunters were inside. Kim Giryo was shocked and didn't understand why there were so many exits in this place. Suddenly, all the journalists froze and looked away in surprise. They saw Kang-chan coming out of another portal, and with him, Chung-ha. Everyone was wondering why Chung-ha was unconscious. A woman from the association approached him and said that they needed to find out the circumstances. She has many questions, but one takes precedence over the rest. Why is the S-rank hunter unconscious? Was the gate really that dangerous? And the man replied that it wasn't. They had a disagreement about who would be the victim. He pointed to Kim Gi-rai and said that during the conflict, it was he who knocked out Chung-ha. The guy was shocked that Kang-chan was lying right after coming out. The woman couldn't believe what he said. It was nonsense. How could the country's top ranker lose to a hunter no one knew? Kim Giryo thought that it was lucky that at least the association staff had common sense. She told the man not to try to deceive her and asked him to answer honestly whether it was true that he did it. Kang-chan's eyes lit up, and he began to look towards Kim Giryo, not understanding why he was standing there like a pillar. Had he already forgotten about the agreement? Kim Girya swallows nervously and realizes that he has no choice. He approaches the employee and says that it is actually true. He knocked out Hunter Chung-ha. This leaves the woman and all the journalists in complete shock. Kim Giryo explained that he didn't mean to harm him. It was easier to get through the dungeon that way, and he would personally apologize to him when he came to his senses. The woman says that if this guy is not S-rank, then it is simply impossible. And Kang-chan starts making excuses because he said that it was not him. Suddenly he felt pain. Sweat appeared on his face, and the guy began to sag. He asked her if she couldn't see that he was in such a state that he couldn't do anything. Kim Gi-rai realizes that Kang-chan has lost quite a bit of blood, but not enough to stagger, which means he is pretending on purpose. The journalist stepped forward and asked if it was really the guy who had defeated Chung-ha. He was asked if it was true that he was the reason Jung-ha was unconscious, and how he was able to knock out an S-rank hunter. Microphones were reaching towards his face from all sides, and everyone was asking him to say at least something. Kim Giryo agreed and said that he did it, but he was forced to. Chung-ha was lying in the hospital, clutching a paper with news that he was unconscious, and articles were written about the reasons for the disagreements between the hunters. He clutched the paper angrily, his teeth clenched, and he didn't understand why Kim Giryo did this. Kim Gi-rai sat at a table in a cafe, and next to him, Yun Sung said that he saw the morning articles before they were deleted. He asked the guy if he really defeated Chung-ha. Kim Giryo couldn't understand whether this was the reason his friend invited him to eat. He replied that yes, he did it. Something like that. He asked Yun Sung if Leo himself had entered the X-gate and was not hurt. Yun Sung replied that he was fine because the guy had pushed him aside, so he had missed. And at that moment, Kim Gi-ryo started to receive a call from an unknown number. He picked up the phone, not understanding who it could be, and the person on the other end of the line asked if it was Hunter Kim Giryo. Young Ha-so is talking to him now, and the guy is stunned. He stepped aside and remembered that he had left the number with the association because he wanted to apologize in person. He didn't understand how to do it. Should he turn on the camera and bow? But Chung-ha said he had questions about what happened yesterday. He asked if it was he who knocked him out at the gate. Chung-ha suddenly lost consciousness and has little memory of anything before or after that moment. He thought it was Kang-chan who did it, but now he's not so sure. From the description, Chung-ha remembers being hit on the head and turning around. But the problem was that Kim Giryo was in the way of his gaze. Chung-ha asked the guy to explain what happened then. The S-rank mammal is confused, and the media is filled with more and more absurd news. Maybe it would be better to say that Kang-chan forced him to take the blame. But why would Jung-ha believe him? He recently learned that Chung-ha is called a national hero, not because he became a paragon of justice, but because this hunter personally closed an unimaginable number of gates. In other words, he's a workaholic who only cares about the gate, whether he'll protect an F rank from Kang-chan, and whether he would be able to defeat him at all. And then he decided to apologize to Chung-ha. He said that he really did it. He was worried that the guy was putting too much pressure on himself, so it ended up like this. Kim Giryo was going to donate his blood while the guy was unconscious. But Kim Giryo has something as an apology, an item that appeared after clearing the gate. Chung-ha didn't understand if the guy was laughing at him because all of this could have been resolved with a conversation, and he thought that one item would be enough to forget everything. He didn't expect such meanness from him. It's obvious why he knocked out Chung-ha at the gate. He was going to sacrifice her and escape. Kang-chan knew him, and could it be that they had conspired from the very beginning? And then he asked if he was really an F-rank hunter. Kim Giryo started to make excuses, saying that there were certain circumstances. But Jung-ha told him to stop, as he was only wasting his time. And from now on, he won't take his eyes off the guy. Kim Giryo wanted to say something else, but the man hung up. Chung-ha apologized to the girl standing behind him and said that he made her wait, and she replied that the man should not worry. She gave him a folder of papers and said that here was the information he asked for. The guild immediately intervened, so all the articles were removed. Everyone was shocked that Chung-ha was beaten by another hunter. What a laughing stock for a national hero. The woman said he didn't need to read everything, but Chung-ha noted that the articles had disappeared and the public was already aware. The world will find out that even S-ranks are vulnerable and people will start to worry. The woman said that if he was interested in her opinion, it was obvious that Hunter Kang-chan was behind all of this. She checked the background of that hunter at the man's request. He is listed as F-rank. Chung-ha said that he thought so too, but something doesn't add up, because Kang-chan wouldn't have let the guy go alive. Why would he bother putting all the blame on the F-rank? If it were true, he could just kill him. More importantly, Kim Giryo watched as Jung-ha fell, with a look like he was not a human being, but just trash. These cold, indifferent eyes. He hadn't felt such discomfort since waking up. He is almost certain that this guy is a false rank, and the girl should contact the association right now. He will request a re-evaluation of Hunter Kim Giryo's awakening level. Skills are a popular term for the supernatural powers of the awakened, and everyone gains at least one skill after awakening. But magic on this planet still has many drawbacks. Mages can only use one attribute after awakening, and Jung-ha with fire magic will never be able to introduce ice magic through training. The only way to use other types of magic is to pay a huge price for a skill stone. But Kim Giryo is a different case. He reincarnated a soul that had learned all aspects of magic, which means that, theoretically, he can use any earthly magic if he fulfills the conditions. The problem is that he can't display that talent now, and he also got involved in an S-rank incident that attracted a lot of attention. So he did a serious search for information and found a way to use a magic power amplifier. His lungs are damaged. He cannot maintain normal energy circulation, but since he still has breathing, he will be able to use a small amount of internal energy. That's why we need a magic power amplifier. There's one problem left. The gate that contains the necessary materials is owned by the Korean Magic Tower Guild. A man came out of the building and immediately recognized Kim Giryo, telling him that he could only enter by appointment. The guy replied that he had a recording, and this made the man laugh. He is an F rank. He was just recently kicked out, and he should stop lying and leaving. Kim Giryo was surprised that he couldn't even stand there, And suddenly, Yun Sung spoke to him. He apologized for being late, as he had been called into the company, but he thought it would be a quick conversation. Kim Giryo said that it was okay. He was the one who asked for help, and the guy had paid off the debt a long time ago. But he had no one else to ask, and he was counting on Yun Seung. The man approached Yun Seung, saying that he always keeps an eye on his raids. Heard that he has been the first to respond to all the dungeon breakthroughs lately, and that he is a big fan of his. He asked what brought the guy here, and he replied that they had contacted the guild in advance and could talk to a representative of the Magic Tower. The man said he wasn't sure if the chief was at headquarters today, but Yun Sung replied that the girl had said she would be there, and they were then invited inside. He started saying that what he said earlier was the company's security policy. F ranks are not allowed to enter here, and he apologized to Kim Gi-rai. Kim Girya remained silent, but he realized that the man in front of the A rank had immediately become polite and began to look at this place, the Korean Magic Tower. It is a large guild with a huge number of employees, and most of the income comes from hunter activity. Today, he has a meeting with the leader of this organization, and Yun Sung talks to the girl at the reception, saying that he is an A-rank hunter and wrote in the mail yesterday. The girl handed him a small sign and asked if he was really going to enter the gate. The head was waiting for him in his office on the top floor. She pointed towards the elevator and said that they needed to go to the 60th floor. The guys were surprised that they would go there themselves, but they still headed towards the elevator. They rode in the elevator for a while, and when they reached the desired floor, they got out and were in shock. Kim Giryo asked his comrade if it was true that something was wrong here. At this time, a girl with bright pink hair was sitting in her office and watching them. Kim Giryo said he was sure he pressed the 60 button, so why were they on the second floor? Yun Seung apologized and said that he forgot to explain everything. It seems like it's a test. There were rumors that the tower representative, the guild leader, had a strange character and was hard to meet because there were only 3 S ranks in Korea, and she was one of them. First, she agrees to meet, and then she pushes the visitors into the labyrinth. They will have to find their way up on their own. And Kim Giri realizes that this means she only dates those who can pass the test. They decide to try to go up the stairs and open the door. It's funny, but from the second floor they ended up in an underground parking lot. It seems like all the doors are gates that will lead in a circle. Together they decide to return to the second floor. Kim Gi-rai asks how many people have taken this test. Yun Sung replies that he doesn't know because he himself is not well informed about it. Kim Giryo notes that everything is a bit too strange. At least the employees should have information, and thinks that only a couple of people in the entire office know about it. He wonders how they should go through something like this themselves. Do they really want the guys to spend some expensive items on it? Kim Gi-rai says that it is interesting to mock guests like this, a disgusting hobby, even if they themselves asked for a meeting. He has to admit, though, that it's a good labyrinth, and he almost wants to see the mage who created it. The labyrinth is made of magic, and its atmosphere is reminiscent of his home. Yun Seung asks what they will do, whether they will split up and look for a way out, since so far they are just wandering aimlessly. Kim Giryo tells him not to worry, because he has lost almost all of his abilities, but he can handle such a task. A beam of mana led him to one of the doors. He leaned his hand on the door and stood there, thinking. The magical structure is simple, but by human standards it is an incredible level, and it seems he has found a solution. He calmly explains that this is the road that leads them to the top floor of the building, which is where they need to go. He asks whether it is worth sending the elevator to another floor so that the space behind the door remains completely empty. In front of them, there is a vertical shaft, inside which the elevator box moves strictly along a vertical line, up and down. He tells his comrades to wait a little, just 1 minute, before they can continue on their way. First, they call the elevator with a button to make sure that it is definitely working and moving in their direction. They then, without hesitation, send him to the top floor of the building to clear the necessary space. After that, they need to quickly get out of there before the elevator leaves, and he tells the guy to carefully back away. Kim Gi-rai starts kicking the door with all his might, and his partner is surprised, not understanding why he is doing this. After several powerful blows, the door cannot withstand the stress, cracks, and falls down with a crash. Yun Sung, perplexed, asks why the guy did all this and what was the purpose of it at all. Kim Giryo says that they have to go because the floor on this floor is connected to the upper floor by a gate. After this, he jumps into the void and tells his partner to do the same. For a while, the guy freezes in place in the air, and everything around him shines. After a couple of seconds, he flies out of the void and lands on the ground. Yun Sung appears nearby and says that he jumped from higher hills in the gate. But for some reason, it was scarier here. Suddenly, they are interrupted by someone's voice saying that she is praising the guys. After all, they were able to get here. They are faster than all the people who have tried to get through the maze. She didn't think they would find a hidden escape route, and that's impressive. But then she says the free lunch is over. And now their opponent is Esther from the Magic Tower. She is the representative of the Korean Magic Tower. She turns to Yun Seung and tells him to sit down. She asks to imagine a person next to her, who seems to be an excellent analyst. Esther says that with mediocre skills, it is impossible to get out of here. She increased the difficulty, but they still got here easily. Kim Giryo was surprised that it was she who created the labyrinth. She really has a unique character. He sits down and says that he will introduce himself. Esther says that she likes capable people. Hunters with rare attributes should get along. Kim Giryo didn't understand what she meant by rare attributes. The girl says that awakened ones with analysis skills are very difficult to find, which is why they are rare. She is one of the few awakened with the curse attribute in the entire world. Kim Giryo recalls that he came across information about their organization during his search. Esther hunts monsters using status anomalies such as weaken or slow. This world has only just begun to use magic, so people with such complex skills are a rarity. He thinks that most awakened ones are like Jung Ha or Kang Chan. They all use powerful but simple magic. People with defense or recovery skills like Yun Seung are much rarer. And the users of curses or complex magic like brainwashing can be counted on one hand. And Kim Giri apologizes for his ignorance. The girl says that he seems to be one of those who throws himself into work. She often appears on live broadcasts. Surely such a cute analyst is in great demand, and she decides to move on to the main business. She asks Yun Sung for what purpose he approached the Magic Tower. The guy turns to Kim Giryo and says that the appeal is not actually his, and he says that he needs to enter the gate. Yun Sung just made an appointment. The staff wouldn't listen to a low-ranking hunter. Esther asks what his rank is, but when she sees his license, she understands everything. This is a common situation for analysts, although the rank is low even among them. She is surprised that he managed to get through the labyrinth and asks why he would go through the gate, since if he wants to collect resources, there will be problems with that. The material from the trees won't even suit her, but the guy says he wasn't even going to touch them. So Esther understands that he doesn't need the fruit, but it's still hard for her to give permission. She thinks that an analyst from another guild came to them, and since Yun Sung brought him, it means that they are both from the Neo Brotherhood. She ponders the cost of having a monopoly on one gate, and says she has no intention of enriching other guilds with her hard work. If he had to come in anyway, she would rather not see the hunters, since this was supposed to be a guild-to-guild conversation. Just for the record, she doesn't have favorites, and she doesn't like to haggle. He should pass that on to his guild. Next time they should think about their reputation and appropriate payment when they come here. She so jealously protects the gate, which she herself estimates to be at best D rank, because she doesn't even know about half of the valuable resources that are there. Kim Girya interrupts her, apologizes, and says that he is not affiliated with the guilds. Yun Seung jumps up and says that it's true. He doesn't even have a team, let alone a guild. He's always alone. Kim Gi-rai says that the girl thought he was an analyst, but he had never done anything like that, and Yun Sung is the only person in this field that he knows. Their deal will not enrich other guilds. It is his personal request. He decides it's worth mentioning something and says that he didn't intend to enter someone else's gate for free. Esther asks him to wait for a minute and then laughs. The atmosphere around her becomes somehow gloomy. She remains at the table, and no one understands what suddenly came over her. Kim Giryo looks at her and doesn't understand why she has such a strange smile, because he didn't even mention the most important detail. Esther asks if he means to say that he is an independent hunter with analytical skills. She doesn't understand why he didn't tell her about this from the very beginning. Esther states that if he joins the Magic Tower, she will hire him right now. She thinks there is no point in asking for a pass, since she will give him the gate. Kim Girya finds this tempting and wonders if she is serious. And Yoon Seung adds that the big guilds don't skimp on magic stones and equipment. He knows that the guilds are constantly poaching analysts, because ordinary people cannot judge the frequency of magic stones with just a glance. They need appraisers to avoid being scammed in trade. Esther says the down payment is 500 million. Kim Girya is surprised and asks her again what she just said, and the girl thinks that it's not even much. Is the Neo Brotherhood really offering more? She feels sorry that Yoon Seung is being taken away from her again. Why do they always take the hunters she wants? Kim Girya thinks about money and imagines how many bowls of soup he can buy with that amount. Esther clarifies that there are many good appraisers in the Magic Tower, so she does not intend to burden him. Kim Gi-rae asks if the girl is serious about offering him 500 million. Esther beams and insists that it's true. Kim Gi-rae contemplates how he would just sit at a table, sort objects, and roll in money without having to participate in dangerous hunting. Sounds good. Esther adds that the work schedule is only 4 days a week, since the assessment department only works then. Kim Gi-rae is shocked to hear about this schedule. He reincarnated only for the sake of retirement, and now he is offered a permanent job again. He remembers having to get up in the morning, work overtime, meet bosses, and listen to stupid complaints. He decides that he never wants to go through that again and refuses to work. The girl is already handing over the documents and promising to add a small incentive. Yoon Seung is shocked when he sees the amount, but the girl says that if he changes his mind, she will be happy to accept him at any time. Kim Girya apologizes and says that he has to refuse. Esther is surprised and asks how much money he wants, but the guy replies that it is not about money at all. He has no desire to join guilds. Esther immediately becomes sad and says that since this is his answer, she will not argue. However, he will have to pay for passage through the gate himself if he refuses her. The question arises whether he will be able to raise such a large sum, and the guy says he would like to discuss it. It has one special material that, when added to concrete for exterior building scenes, gives skill resistance. Such a building will be able to survive even after an attack by monsters, because the material absorbs mana. Maintaining a barrier around the building is too expensive for her. He believes that such an exchange should cover the cost of entering the gate. Esther agrees that this is more than enough, but only if everything he said is true. Kim Girya puts down the bag and says that she can check it herself, because only he knows where to find this material, but he is ready to share the secret. Yoon Seung realizes that this is the same land with which he defeated the bats. It turns out that sand also absorbs mana. Kim Girya admits that he revealed this trump card too early, but people are constantly exploring the gates, and would have discovered everything soon anyway. Better to sell at a high price while you can, because Esther doesn't believe that this sand is so effective. She only plans to use this information to enter a simple gate, and doesn't even plan to share it with other guilds. Kim Gi-rae asks if he really needs to promise not to trade this sand with others, and the girl answers yes, but in that case, he will be left in the red. She may be right, but he doesn't need more. He decides to call it helping a colleague with a rare attribute. It's already evening. Esther is sitting in the office alone, and a girl is standing in front of her. The girl asks if the lady is worried about something. Esther replies that everything is fine. She just played a little joke on their guest. The girl thinks that this is about the guests who were there recently. Could it be that she has put some kind of curse on them again? She is angry because the lady promised not to do it again, and Esther says that it was funny. It's not some kind of terrible curse at all, but rather a minor nuisance, comparable to accidentally hitting your little finger on a piece of furniture. She cast a sneezing spell on them for only 30 seconds, and the girl herself considered it a childish and stupid prank. But she never heard anyone sneeze, and Esther calmly confirmed that everything was exactly as it should be. When she activated the skill, the boy was bound to immediately start sneezing uncontrollably, unable to stop. Instead, however, he suddenly raised his head and looked straight into her eyes, as if piercing her with his gaze. His gaze clearly showed restrained anger, in which there was not a drop of indifference or a hint of confusion. It turned out that he knew about everything perfectly well from the very beginning. He just hid it and endured until the right moment. Esther's curse works even on S ranks, but it didn't work on him. Where did this guy come from? Suddenly, a man enters the room and announces that he has brought the test results of the material that the hunter gave him. It really does have an absorbent effect. He shared valuable material so easily. Perhaps he wanted to impress her. But Esther feels uneasy and orders to collect all available information about Kim Giryo in order to understand who he is. At this time, Kim Gi-rai was vomiting into one of the trash cans, and Yun Sung was asking if he was okay. Kim Giryo decides to remember the name of the drink, coffee, and never drink it again. He thought the drink was intended for guests and took a good sip. But the smell was reminiscent of industrial glue with alphory. He found it disgusting and wondered how anyone could serve something like that to guests. At that moment, his gaze crossed with Esther. The girl asked him if he didn't like the coffee, but he replied that everything was delicious. He couldn't spit it out so as not to give himself away. Giryo's body is controlled by alien magic. The enemy must know the structure of magic better than him in order to take over his body. Drugs, hypnosis, and curses do not work on him. This even applies to the curse of an S-rank hunter, and the guy buys water from a vending machine. Yun Seung starts talking about the material that Esther received. The guy claims that no one else knows about it. He really hadn't heard of sand that could instantly extinguish a flamethrower's fire and strengthen a building. Kim Gi-rai says that he recently found it, and Yun Seung asks if he understands the value of the find, since he handed it over without registering it with the association. It turns out that Kim Giryo is really serious about collaborating with Esther, and now there is almost no doubt about it. Kim Gi-rai takes a few sips of water and calmly replies that his actions have nothing to do with the association. He admitted that he only wanted to leave a good impression and show that he was capable of doing the right thing. Yun Seung asks with a smile if he really likes her, but the guy denies it and says that he doesn't have any feelings. Then Yun Seung asks what he is really looking for in the gate if he decided to go so far and take risks. The next morning, Kim Gi-rai wakes up in his bed, stretches slowly, and feels a slight aching pain throughout his body. After that, he heads to the dryer to check if everything he put in there yesterday is dry. Yesterday, he and his partner entered the dungeon, which he had previously agreed upon with Esther. There they were attacked by a huge flock of humanoid insects with yellow wings. Yun Seung activated his shield and easily defeated them all thanks to the help of the A-rank hunter, and the hunt went well. Kim Giryo managed to reach the goal without any problems and obtain the key element for the mana amplifier, the wings of the fairy monster. At first he was a little worried, but together with a friend he managed to collect the required amount. Everything is going according to plan, and the other ingredients are quite easy to get compared to this. He is one step closer to restoring his magical powers, and when he reaches his ultimate goal, human domination of this planet will end. He decides that now is the time to replenish the calories and feed this body. Opening the refrigerator and reaching for the eggs, he suddenly turns away. He heard a sound at the door and cannot understand who it could be. Family members or friends? There were two menacing men in glasses standing behind the door, and Kim Giryo said that he would open it now. If it's someone you know well, he might have problems. He opens the door and is greeted by the Hunters Association staff. Sun Woo-yan shows his badge and asks the guy to give them some time. Kim Gi-rai gets upset because he was just about to eat and asks about the reason for the visit, but the girl asks him to leave the apartment. She apologizes for such a sudden visit, but explains that they are required to carry out such tasks without prior notice. The girl asks to allow her to explain the purpose of their arrival. They received a report of an illegal awakened registration, and Kim Gi-rai is suspected of manipulating his rank. For this reason, it is necessary to recheck the awakened level, and she asks him to go with them. This needs to be done right now, otherwise they will have to use force. Kim Gi-rai realizes that he will probably have to skip one meal, and now they are all driving together in a black car at quite a high speed. To explain the reason for the black-haired girl's sudden visit to Kim Gi-rai, we need to go back a few weeks. At that time, he stated that he had an F rank. The girl was very surprised by this because how could he defeat the rookie killer? His answer was completely uncharacteristic of a rank F, and the girl began to suspect a fake from that moment. As Sun Woo Yeon began investigating, her suspicions only grew stronger. He was indeed low-ranked and had only participated in a raid once in his entire career. A hunter with no combat experience was able to survive an attack by a high-ranking monster. If this person is truly hiding his rank, he could be dangerous, especially when surrounded by weak hunters. However, Song Woo-yeon did not have the authority to conduct a deeper investigation, and she could only file a report. In a normal situation, this would be where it all ended. However, just a few days later, the girl saw amazing news. The awakened C rank was carried out of the dungeon in an unconscious state. The case took a serious turn when the hunter Chung Ha himself filed a complaint. The girl is just an ordinary government employee, but now that a national hero is involved, everything has changed. She is almost certain that Kim Giri is a false rank hunter, and even expected him to show aggression. But so far, everything is going calmly. Moreover, his home seemed very old and cheap to her. Even D-rank hunters can afford a decent apartment, so either he's an ascetic or he has secret assets. Kim Gi-rai asks how much it will cost to recheck his rank since he doesn't have much money. The girl replies that the test costs 480,000 won. But since the test is being conducted as part of an investigation, there is no need to pay. This only applies if the previous rank is confirmed. Otherwise, he will be billed and fined. Kim Gi-rai gets upset, thinking how he could have gotten himself into this. He looks at the counters where people sit behind glass with laptops and conduct checks. He believes that with this approach, it is impossible to accurately determine the level of awakening of the population. Considering his lungs and the terrible condition he's in, he has nothing to worry about, as the tests are primitive. Sun Woo Yeon asks him to come over because they will be using the latest equipment. The old test had inaccuracies caused by lung disease, and he probably received a notification. She believes that he had enough time to adjust the results. Kim Gi-ryo tries to stop her, saying that it seems like there was an error. They take him by the hands from both sides and decide to proceed with the test. He doesn't even need to remove metal objects. After some time, the girl reports that the results are ready. If the level of awakening is very different from before, he will be accused of falsification. He is probably aware of the consequences of such an outcome. Kim Gi-ryo is shocked. Who knew that they would fix the equipment in time? The huge reserves of mana, previously hidden due to lung problems, can now be discovered. How to explain everything to him? Tell the truth that he is an alien, and his body cannot use mana because of smoking, and on top of that, the cost of the test is 480,000 won. The girl looks at the documents and says that the level of awakening is the 14th, category F. No traces of falsification. The figure has risen by about 2 points since the previous check, but this is considered insignificant. Kim Gi-ryo asks if the level of awakening can increase over time. Sun Woo Yeon replies that no. After a sharp jump, there is always a plateau. The awakening level in natural conditions remains stable, meaning his body is indeed rank F. He believed that he could not use magic not because of low strength, but because of damaged lungs. But even when he approached the golem, it did not notice him, attacking only the members of the group. It turns out that he was not even considered a threat at first, after which Kim Giri begins to laugh, realizing the obvious truth. His attempt to restore his magical power failed, and now he will have to adapt to the body of the weakest awakened. He even thinks that he was lucky to find out the truth quickly, because now he is cleared of suspicion. The girl asked if he wanted to undergo an examination, since sometimes when testing awakened people, there are side effects. Kim Gi-rai thanked her for her concern and replied that he felt completely fine, although the girl felt that his face had drooped a little since the test. The guy asked Sun Woo how she knew that he was at home all the time. Sun Woo explained that this was her awakening technique called sleuth. In simple terms, it was a tracking skill that could be learned more about in the Pixie system. It is capable of detecting the location of people and objects in real time, and its ability proves to be very useful in investigating crimes. And at that moment, he suddenly stops Sun Woo Yeon because he sees a dead animal in front of them. Song Woo came closer and realized that it was a raccoon that appeared to have been hit by a car. Kim Gi-ryo sat down next to him and the girl explained that this kind of thing sometimes happens. The guy picked up the raccoon and said it was a good find. Song-woo said that the animal seemed to have been lying there for a long time, and it was better not to touch it. Kim Giryo took the animal in his arms, said that he only needed to wash his hands, and added that it was time for them to say goodbye. He noticed that his house was very close, literally around the corner. The girl didn't understand whether he really wanted to bury the raccoon's corpse. On Alfara, golems are created from two main materials. The first type are mineral golems, created from metal and hard rock. The second type are organic golems, created from the corpses of living beings. In other words, Kim Giri simply got hold of a good test sample. He's lucky because here on Earth, biological samples are literally lying around on the road, and once he completes the amplifier, he'll have material to test the results on. Song-woo was surprised by the guy's actions. She didn't expect to find such traits in him, and unexpectedly, his action made a good impression on the ignorant earthly girl. Kim Giryo couldn't understand what was wrong and why it wasn't mixing. He wondered if it was just that it was difficult to achieve the desired result without the right tools. Even if it's an EF rank body, he must obtain magical power. Suddenly, a call came in. But the guy was already in a bad mood, and he wondered who was calling so late. He shouldn't have added the analysis skill to Kim Giri's profile after reading that post online, because he didn't expect so many people to pay attention to it. Since he added the analysis item to his profile, he has been receiving endless offers from scouts. He was so exhausted that he was too lazy to even reply to messages. He decided to see what was there and wondered if this was another offer. But it turned out that it was an advertisement for a confectionery store, prepared especially for him with the promise of delicious chocolate, the best in all of Korea. It was also indicated that it was available at the nearest store. A few minutes later, the guy went outside, although he had no strength. But the message said that the product was prepared especially for him, and it would have been foolish to ignore such an offer. He had barely left the yard when a car stopped in front of him. Kim Giryo looked through the windows and didn't understand why there was a car parked there. And then several men in caps flew out of the car. They grabbed the guy from behind while he didn't realize what was happening. He didn't have time to do anything and immediately lost consciousness. His head was splitting, and he thought that if it had been a magical attack, he might have been able to come up with something, but he was still vulnerable to normal physical attacks. He didn't understand how long he had been unconscious, or what this place was. This planet seemed less and less hospitable to him, and he wondered who had come up with the idea to commit such a mean act. Suddenly, someone turned to the man, asking if he was a rank F, and he replied that yes, he had caught him at the appointed place. Kim Giryo realized that they had already chosen him as a target, and wondered when he had managed to cross these people. One said that he took the D-rank guys just in case, because this guy barely resisted, and the man ordered to make sure that no problems arose. Suddenly someone appeared, whom everyone called the boss, and he asked if this was the person he was looking for. They told him to say hello because he was their VIP client, and everyone greeted him happily. They added that they would inspect the goods later, as they had prepared everything in advance. The boss asked why the guy wasn't out yet. Kim Giryo was surprised how they knew about this, and at that moment, the mask was removed from his face. Standing in front of him was Kang Chan, who greeted him and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Kim Giryo was shocked and asked why he was there, and he replied that he understood his confusion and would explain everything now. Lately, there have been rumors circulating in circles about a hunter with amazing skills who managed to get through the labyrinth in the Tower of Magicians. But it turned out that this hunter was only of EF rank. Low-ranking individuals with amazing abilities become easy targets for criminals. Kim Giryo asked what they intended to do, and the man replied that they intended to sell it, since their industry was full of people who wanted to secure secret but powerful resources. Analysts are especially highly valued, but the guy probably knew how expensive their contracts were. When kidnapped, the price is greatly reduced, especially in the long term, which means he was captured by people who are engaged in the sale of awakened ones. Kang Chang said that things were even easier with the low ranks, since they were easily susceptible to spells, and such goods were very valuable. Even some of their employees were brainwashed by such spells, and after the effect was imposed, they would never betray their masters. Kim Giryo asked if the man was not going to help him, to which he replied that he shouldn't, since he was there as a client. He said that he had to go on business now and was glad that he was able to see Kim Giryo. After that, he ordered the others to carry the guy upstairs, and they replied that they would do everything. Kim Giryo increasingly regretted that he had reincarnated in this particular place. He was roughly thrown into another room. One man noticed that he was not wearing a bandage, and the other said that it didn't matter because he would soon fall asleep anyway. The door closed, and they left the guy alone in complete darkness. He reasoned that since he had been moved here, it meant that they wouldn't sell it right away. But he didn't understand why they were putting it off. And suddenly, he noticed some sweet floral scent. He saw that there was something on the nightstand, and he thought that it was a magical object. He assumed that the item worked as a sleeping pill, and judging by the intensity, such an artifact was capable of knocking out even a person of EF rank. But, fortunately, on him, the Archmage Alfari, this isn't going to work, so it's time to get out of here. He couldn't untie his shoelace, so he put it in his mouth and started rubbing it against the handcuffs. He began to rub the cord vigorously and prayed that the friction would help him. A few more minutes, and it worked. The ropes on his hands broke. Even though he was immune to brainwashing spells, the prospect of being sold as a commodity still did not appeal to him. At first, he decided that he needed to contact someone, but noticed that he didn't have a phone. He thought it was natural, because who would leave the stolen person his belongings? The guy started to get up and didn't understand what options he had left. Once again, he lingered his gaze on the strange artifact, emitting a sweet, intoxicating smell that hung in the air. Slowly, as if hesitating, he took the object, hung with heavy chains, into his hands, and thought that he had no other choice. There were two men standing by the door, doing their job of guarding the place, and one of them, clearly bored, was staring at his phone screen. Suddenly, both of them shuddered sharply and turned around in fear in the direction of an unexpectedly loud sound that came from behind them. The door fell out of the doorway with a dull thud, and a bright yellow light, mixed with a sickly, sweet aroma, poured out of the room. The guards quickly covered their noses with their hands, wondering what strange breath had filled the space. Suddenly, one of the men was hit in the face by a magical object that had escaped from the hands of an uninvited guest. The second one immediately understood what the catch was, but still couldn't figure out how the guy managed to get out. The sweet smell became thicker and thicker, and the guard, unable to bear it, staggered, fell to the floor, and fell into a deep sleep. Kim Giryo calmly, almost silently, walked out of the room, holding a shining, magical object on a chain. He looked at it and realized that it was quite effective. I decided that I needed to get out before someone raised the alarm. He stumbles upon the phone of one of the kidnappers and realizes that it's just in time. In such situations, Earthlings always dial number 112. After a couple of rings, he received an answer. And on the other end of the line, he heard that he had called the police and was asked what had happened. The guy said he had been kidnapped, but people didn't understand and asked him to repeat it. They asked him to speak clearly, and the guy repeated that he had been kidnapped. Kim Giryo realized that they couldn't hear him, so maybe there was something wrong with the phone. Then he decides he just needs to write, and he writes a message saying he has been kidnapped and is asking for help. He received 2 notifications. Request received. Response time may vary. If he has an urgent request, he should call 112. He asked how soon they would arrive, but received the same answer. He realized that it was an answering machine. Whether his message was read or not, whether it was sent at all, he was not sure. Decides that he should prepare a backup plan and writes to Yoon Sung. After this, he puts the phone in his pocket and decides that he is done with this. He took the magic item in his hands and decided that he needed to continue his escape. At this time, 2 men were walking through the building, and suddenly they noticed something. They noticed that the room was becoming suspiciously smoky and looked at each other, trying to figure out the reason. Coming closer, one of them jokingly asked if any of their comrades had decided to dye their hair. However, it was not the familiar guard who appeared in front of them, but Kim Giryo, confidently waving a magic item and heading straight towards them. Without slowing down, he delivered a sharp blow from afar to one of the men, forcing him to recoil. The second one immediately recognized him as the same guy they had recently defeated, but the realization came too late. A moment later, he too received a strong blow right in the face, causing him to stagger and barely stay on his feet. As it turns out, even a magic item can give a good punch to the nose, leaving a long-lasting memory of the meeting. Now Kim Giryo urgently needed to find a way out, but all the windows were boarded up tightly, and he had no idea about the layout of the building. Suddenly, he felt a powerful magical emission, such that even an F-rank hunter could detect it, and he immediately realized that this was a gate. But unfortunately, they apparently opened outside the building he was stuck in. After all, gates almost always appear in forests or open spaces. He can use this as a landmark. Suddenly, a crowd appeared behind him. Not understanding what was happening, was the guy trying to escape. Kim Giryo runs to the side, deciding that he needs to go down first. He starts to go down the steps and feels a sharp pain. He only asks for a little time, but his leg is already not functioning well. They started chasing him. How could they not notice this guy? And they ordered everyone to grab him. But soon the chief noticed that Kim Giryo was holding a magical object in his hands, from which a light smoke was emanating. He immediately ordered his men to retreat back, but Kim Giryo only chuckled and said that they were too late to realize it. Swinging, he activated the object again, and thick smoke began to fill the room even faster, obscuring everything around. The pursuers quickly covered their noses and mouths, trying not to inhale, but the smoke became thicker and thicker. As the boy made another swing, one of the men rushed forward and grabbed him tightly by the arm. He forcefully threw Kim Giryo aside and then quickly approached, intending to seize him completely. In an instant, the guard pressed him against the wall, pressed his elbow into his chest, and squeezed his throat, not allowing him to escape. He coldly remarked that he usually tried not to spoil his goods, but today he was prepared to make an exception. However, Kim Giryo reacted with lightning speed. Raising his knee, he sharply hit the man on the chin. He staggered, began to fall backwards, and received another strong blow to the chest, finally losing his balance. Now they were both lying on the floor. Like the other men, Kim Giryo said that this was all very annoying. He opened the magic item and realized that there was no mana left in it. This shocked him, because his leg was at its limit. He had already been discovered, and the locals had now stolen the artifact. The longer he stays here, the harder it will be for him to get out. And suddenly, he notices doors with blue light coming from them. He understands that this is the way out. He feels the energy behind these doors. Given the standard layout of Earth buildings, a large door should lead to the exit. He starts to open it and is surprised that it is not even closed. He opens the door and hears someone shouting that the awakened one from the upper floor has escaped. The guy went into the room where the boss and the customers were standing. The man with the cane was very surprised and did not understand what kind of mess was going on. Are his people really so bad at management that goods just run away? Kim Girai is surprised that this gate is inside the building and sees that Kang-chan is also here, and he hoped that the energy was coming from outside. But in the end, the magical emissions led him to a dead end. One man turned to the guy and told him to answer what was happening to their people upstairs. Could he really have dealt with that huge crowd all by himself? Was the informant mistaken? Is he really an F rank? Kim Giryo realizes that those people didn't realize that he used an artifact to escape. A good opportunity to play the tough guy and get out by bluffing. But as long as Kang-chan is here, it might not work. The man apologizes to Kang-chan. They almost closed the deal, but then such a problem occurred. He knows he's asking a lot, but could he do a favor? The man needs to help capture this hunter. The transport will be done by midnight. Of course, he could use his people, but when the S rank takes on the matter, it is much faster and more reliable. Kim Girya doesn't understand what kind of nonsense this is and pushes the work onto a VIP client. Kang-chan replies that he'll be happy to help, since they're in the same boat. Then he asks the man. He said that he was looking for a good analyst, and he could offer him a guy for a big discount. Kang-chan asks the guy if he heard what his partner said here. He will sell Kim Girye for a trifle. It seems he understands what kind of trouble can be expected from him. Kim Girai wonders what to do when the police arrive, whether they are even coming, and whether his friend received the message. Kang Chan asks why he doesn't run away right now. The path behind him is clear. If he doesn't hesitate, Kang Chan will let him go this time. But if he could, he would have run away long ago. And he asks the man if he has ever seen Kim Giryo run away. Kang Chan remembers all the moments they shared with the guy. And he says that no, he has never seen him run away. Kang Chan asks if the guy really means that he won't run away this time either. And he decides that they will then get down to business straight away. Kim Gi-rai says he doesn't think they should fight here and just gives up. Kang Chan laughs. He beat up all the guards here to get out. And now he just decided to give up. What made him think that Kang Chan would trust him so easily? But to be honest, the guy also didn't trust the one who had just tried to escape. What do you think? What should you do now? And a bright blue beam appears next to him. They realize what it was and look away. A man comes out of the portal and asks the boss if he has been expected for a long time. Kim Giryo is very surprised that someone came out of the gate. This is not a gate at all, but a magical passage, which means it is a spatial movement skill. The man says that he is, as always, punctual, arrived exactly at 12 o'clock, and of course, is never late. Kang Chan, understanding everything, asks if he is really their carrier. The boss replies that yes, he possesses extremely rare magic that can even move people. He introduces the hunter Kang Chan to the man. He probably knows about him, and Kim Girya at that moment thinks that he can take advantage of the moment and escape. The man says that he is glad to meet the best hunter in the world. He says that it is an honor for him, but before he can finish speaking, he suddenly gets punched in the face by Kang Chan. The blow is surrounded by a green force and is so strong that the man is thrown to the side. The boss watches all this and doesn't understand what's going on. He asks Kang Chan what he's doing, and the man replies that he spent a lot of time and money to finally swat that mosquito. The awakened, who could move to different points in an instant, were a real pain in the ass, and he had a hard time getting to him. If they were engaged in illegal trade or occupying the gates, he wouldn't care. Kim Giryo watched all this and did not understand what was happening. Kang Chan said that these bastards are now taking people out of his jurisdiction. The guards immediately start telling the boss to run faster to the gate, but Kang Chan is already behind him. He hits the man on the back very quickly and accurately. Kim Girya understands that he has no chance of defeating him at the moment. It's not for nothing that he received S rank. Initially, there were only ranks from F to A, but over time, hunters emerged whose magical power exceeded any dimension. It was then decided to make changes, and the newly introduced S rank was introduced. As a result, it became the top of the food chain on Earth. Kang Chan defeated all the guards in a few minutes, and the boss begged for mercy. Kang Chan was angry, his eyes were burning. How he had the audacity to beg for mercy. He smiled mockingly, as if he was enjoying the situation, and called him a pathetic piece of trash, emphasizing his contempt. The man at this time pressed himself against the cold wall, sat huddled, and trembled all over with fear, not daring to raise his eyes. Kim Giryo watched the scene unfold, and suddenly a man's sharp cry pierced the silence, causing him to flinch. He immediately realized that under no circumstances should he cross Kang Chang-ho's path if he wanted to stay alive. As Kang Chan dealt with the last of his opponents, he suddenly heard strange sounds coming from nearby. The next second, it became clear that the police had arrived, and the noise became closer and clearer. He turned to Kim Giryo and asked if he had called the police, to which he calmly replied that he had. Kang Chan looked at him silently and in surprise for a while, and the guy couldn't understand what was so strange about it. Kang Chan explained that, to be clear, he had no intention of getting involved with the organization, but rather his goal was to stop the sale of Korean hunters overseas. Kim Gi-rai said the police would handle it themselves, but the man said he should understand how slowly they were working. It would have taken them days just to find the place, and from the moment the awakened appeared, they all began to flock to their new profession. There was an acute shortage of personnel in ordinary positions, but this time they quickly came to their senses, and it seems not without the intervention of Kim Giryo. He was very interested, but he left this question for another time. Today, it was too late. Kang Chan started to leave, and the boy asked where he was going and told him to wait. He turned around and looked at everything he had done and the dead people. If this SA rank just leaves in such a situation, he will have problems again. Police officers burst into the building, pointed guns at him and told him to put his hands behind his head. If he tries to use magic, the punishment will be more severe. They asked what happened here and where the kidnapped person was, and the guy said that he was kidnapped. The police told him not to move. He is suspected of breaking the law and using the force of an awakened person. Kim Giryo thought that he was innocent, but he could not prove anything. Suddenly, someone entered their building and ordered everyone to stop. It was Sun Woo Yeon. She immediately recognized the guy in front of her. She asked the police why they were arresting him. Kim Giryo said he had the same question. The girl said he was the one who reported the kidnapping, and the police started to remove his handcuffs, saying they were very sorry. Kim Gi-rae asked the girl if she had also received the message, and she said that Hunter Yun-sung had contacted her. He said he received a letter from Kim Gi-rae saying he had been kidnapped and asking him to contact Sun Woo Yeon. Hunter Yun-sung was currently sent to deal with a dungeon breach, and he received his message right during the mission. The girl said that she used tracking skills, but they were suddenly interrupted. The police officers said they had identified everyone there as members of a gang accused of human trafficking. There has been a recent spate of kidnappings of Korean hunters, and it appears they have been holding meetings here. Song Woo had heard about this organization. Their boss had been hiding well up until now, and the police officer said that he was most likely the leader of the group, and without their leader, they would quickly disappear. He approached the guy and asked if it was his doing. Kim Giryo said no. There was another hunter here, Kang Chan. The policeman said that more people were found unconscious on the top floor. And did the guy really mean to say that he had nothing to do with it? Kim Giryo explained that he had tried on the other floor, and he was asked to explain everything as it happened. Kim Gi-rae realized that the situation was too suspicious and said that he did it only for self-defense. Song Woo thought that when they entered, the guy wasn't even tied up, standing alone in their boss's room, and he even called the police himself. She turned her head and looked around the room with the corpses. I realized that the guy didn't have a single bruise, and he didn't look at all like a victim who was about to be sent abroad. Is it true that he was kidnapped? And is it possible that he planned it all from the very beginning? Kim Giryo sat at home, looked at the table and said that he did not expect this, did not even hope for it. But receiving such a magical item for free turned out to be very pleasant. Even if the police were unable to fully determine its effect and find the real owner, he believes that it is a very unusual artifact that can be charged, which is very convenient. Even though he later left him to sort out the situation alone, Kim Giryo received good compensation. But this artifact only works on people and will have no effect on monsters. And then the kettle starts boiling, and the guy rejoices. He turns off the stove, pours liquid into a cup, and says that he made this color just perfect. To create something like this, only resources from an old civilization were used, and he truly lives up to his status as a genius archmage. The elixir of mana boost increases the base mana needed to cast spells when consumed, allowing him to temporarily cast magic. In other words, it serves as an external push, like a great lighter. He drinks the whole glass, puts it on the table, and realizes that his breathing is fine. The effect lasts for 5 minutes, which is enough to activate one spell. Well, it's time for him to use his magic on Earth for the first time. He will heal his right kneecap and calf muscle that have been bothering him for so long. He casts a spell, magic appears in his hand, and he stabilizes his physical condition. Did it really work? He really doesn't feel any pain anymore, but it's too early to rejoice. He has a long marathon ahead of him, and now, having seen it for himself, he can say that Kim Giryo's body is just trash. To think that all his mana was used up by one spell, moreover, due to the deplorable state of his lungs, he can't drink the potion too often. The guy decides that he needs to be more patient and not rush things. Although this is a small but successful step, he must keep his head up and remember what he has planned next. He is about to get something out of the drawer, but suddenly there is a knock on the door, and he wonders if someone has come to see him. He slowly makes his way towards the door, thinking along the way that perhaps it was Sun Woo again, deciding to drop in unannounced. He carefully opens the door, asks who is there, and hears a man standing on the threshold calling him son. Kim Giryo is slightly surprised because he found him at home and he himself was already about to reach for the phone to call someone. A moment later, he remembers that this man seems to be the owner of the apartment he now lives in. He greets him politely, and the man apologizes in response for showing up without warning. Then he asks the guy, somewhat doubtfully, if he is having money problems again this month. Kim Gi-rae doesn't understand what he means, and the man says that he hasn't received the rent yet. He adds that 3 months have already passed, and alas, he cannot wait any longer. But he took the papers out of the mailbox. He did not pay the other bills either. Kim Giryo wonders how many bills he still has to pay. The man says that he has been pestered with constant phone calls, apologizes, but is not going to wait longer than this month. He reminds that the rent is 450,000 won, for 3 months in total. 1,350,000 won. If the guy is not going to collect the money, then he must vacate the apartment, and the man asks him to do it the nice way. Kim Gi-rae returns home and realizes that if he does not pay 1,350,000 won, he will be thrown out onto the street. There are only 14 days left until the end of the month, and if you add the accumulated bills to the rent, it will come to approximately 2 million won. Where could he get that kind of money? Maybe Kim Giryo had some kind of stash. Suddenly, he remembers something and runs to the phone, because he definitely has a way out. This option doesn't appeal to him too much, but he'll have to use his stash. He dials someone's number and asks if it's Kang Chang-ho's number. Kang Chan listens to something about compensation, remembering the incident with the car when Kim Giri refused his offer last time, but now suddenly changed his mind. Kang Chan asks the guy how much money he needs. Kim Giryo hesitantly says 3 million, and the man asks her to speak more clearly because he can't hear him. The guy only really needs 2 million, but given this whole kidnapping thing, he might ask for a little more. Kang Chan says that if the guy is going to keep quiet, he will just hang up, and Kim Giryo stops him and says that he needs 3 million. He asks if it's possible, and Kang Chan doesn't understand why he's asking. And just a couple of minutes later, he sends the guy what he thinks is small change. Kim Giryo is surprised that he transferred the money so easily, but after he pays all the bills and rent, he doesn't have much left, and now he has to think about more than just food. Where can he find more easy money? Because he is an alien without his own powers on an alien planet. And at that moment, Yoon Sung calls him. The guy remembers that he didn't even thank him for that incident. Probably Yoon Sung was worried and decided to call himself. He's about to pick up the phone, but remembers that A-rank hunters can earn several million just from one dungeon run. And now they are together in a cafe. And Kim Giryo thanks his friend for contacting Seon-woo in time, because he really helped him out. As a token of gratitude, the guy would like to treat Yoon Seung, but he replies that it's not worth it, unless a cup of coffee is enough for him. This kind of friend would be enough for him, but Kim Giryo thinks that he should have just offered him a dish, because the smell of coffee alone makes him sick. A man appears behind the counter and asks if they have decided on their order. Yoon Seung says he will have an Americano, and Kim Gi-ryo chooses a vanilla latte. He asks that you please not add coffee to it. The bartender is very surprised, but says that he understands and will do everything possible. Already sitting at the table, Yoon Seung says that he was very surprised when he learned that Kim Giryo had been kidnapped. He apologized for not being able to come to the rescue in person, and the guy said that it was okay, since he was dealing with the dungeon breach at the time. Yes, but to be honest, the situation there was dire, so Yoon Sung could only hope for Sun-woo. Kim Gi-rae says that means he worked hard and praises him for it, deciding to start with a light compliment to lighten the atmosphere. And then he asked if for now he was only doing dungeon breakthroughs or something else. How long has it been since he went on a raid inside the dungeon? Kim Giryo notes that it seems like he is still afraid to enter the gate. Yoon Sung admitted that, to be honest, it is. It's still hard for him, and coming back is exactly what Kim Gi-rae expected. A sudden fight with a high-level monster, betrayal of close comrades, and fear of death hung over him. For a 20-year-old youth, this was too much of a shock, and it was quite expected that he could have suffered psychological trauma. Kim Giryo says that she can't support him as an F-rank hunter forever. He tells the guy that he needs to assemble his new team or prepare for a career as a lone hunter. They notice that Yun Seong suddenly wilted, thinking that the guy was going to leave him or something. But no, he is not so stupid as to give up his trump card. He says that, in general, he thought about it and decided, if he doesn't mind, he could give Yun Seong a few lessons and asked what he thinks about it. He can improve his mana control and skill usage. Yun Seong says he would be happy. Kim Gi-ryo thinks that this fish came to him easily, a pleasant feeling, and says that then, since the conversation has already started, why don't they immediately move to the appropriate gate? They arrive at the gate, and Kim Gi-ryo thinks that so far everything is going according to plan. This is a D-rank dungeon called Maximus's Shrine. The drop rate of magic stones here is very low, and therefore hunters are rarely seen here. In other words, it is an ideal training area. Kim Gi-ryo says that Yun Seong's awakening has a strong defense bias and asks him to show him his main skill. Yun Seong says he understands everything, but he is a little nervous about showing off his strength. He takes a huge shield in his hands, and blue power glows from it. Magic Shield is active. The first function is to create a magical barrier in the form of a shield for the owner. The second is that the more mana is used, the larger the barrier. Yun Seong smiles happily and asks the guy what he thinks about it. Kim Gi-ryo thinks for a long time and then asks him to answer one question. Why does the guy only protect himself from the front? Yun Seong replies that this is how the skill works. It has been like this since he awakened. Kim Gi-ryo realizes that this is like watching a chimpanzee use a knife for the first time and wonders where to begin his instructions. He says that the skill actually involves protection not only from the front, but from all sides. A small wall in front of his face is no good. He can use it as a protective dome to completely cover his body. Yun Seong says he can increase the size of the shield, but has no idea how to change its shape. Kim Gi-ryo thinks that the guy is a fool, but doesn't say it, and just asks him to try again. Only this time, he must imagine that the center of the skill is coming from just below his neck, and then release the mana around that center like a crystal ball. Yun Seong is surprised, and says that he doesn't seem to quite understand. Kim Gi-ryo places her hand on his shoulder and tells him to stop whining and just try. The main thing is to focus your thoughts. He must keep his back straight, breathe deeply, and not interfere with the flow of mana. It was a difficult process for both him and the new recruit, but after 20 minutes of grueling training, they finally saw the results. Yun Seong was able to activate his power correctly, and a circular barrier was now created around him. He was happy, he didn't believe that it all worked, and asked the guy to look here. Could it really have worked? But he can hardly move, and the barrier begins to gradually collapse and then completely breaks into pieces. Yun Seong is sad that the barrier broke, but Kim Gi-ryo says it's okay. He just needs practice. At least there is progress. Once he hones this skill, he will be able to apply it without blind spots. Yun Seong thanks the guy. He never imagined that he could use the skill in such a way. It turns out that the skills interact directly with his mind. Mana flow is highly dependent on the owner's mental state, so maintaining a high self-esteem can increase the chance of becoming a powerful mage. Yun Seong asks what they will do next. Kim Gi-ryo replies that next, they have practical training. To truly hone his skills, he needs to use them in real-life situations. And here they are in a dungeon. They are attacked by a huge knight with a sword. He swings his weapon at Yun Seong, but he activates his shield and creates a barrier around himself. And then with one blow, he breaks the stone knight into pieces. Suddenly, he feels that another monster is attacking him from the other side. But he doesn't turn around, but creates a shield behind his back, which helps him take cover. And then it flies towards the monster and smashes his weapon. Still with the barrier, he lands on the ground. And then it flies through the monster at great speed, and it breaks into several pieces of stone. Kim Gi-ryo stands to the side, shouting that the guy is doing a great job. Doing a great job? What should she expect from an A-rank hunter? And now he understands that it's time to take care of his own affairs. He heard that magic stones and gems on the heads of monsters are worth good money. He tells the boy to be careful and not to get too carried away. He himself is collecting stones at this time. He is using training as an excuse to exploit the hunter. In other words, he collects free loot while he is busy fighting. And really, why bother killing monsters yourself? This bag alone will last you a month. It's much better than directly asking Yun Seong to hunt for him. But if the attitude towards Kim Gi-rae changes, then this will come to an end, so we need to extract as much benefit as possible without letting him suspect. Kim Gi-ryo approaches the boy and asks how he is, and if he has become more accustomed to using his new abilities. But he notices that his reaction is somehow very strange. Gi-ryo's scheme? Yun Seong, an A-rank hunter, had never experienced a strong sense of amazement since he was a child. None of the elders at his school could gain his respect, and he did not even acknowledge the achievements of famous athletes praised on television. His argument: there are other people who have achieved more significant results, and this is great. This was the maximum of his feeling. But today, Yun Seong finally realized the meaning of the word astonishment. It's incredible how Kim Gi-rae was able to unlock the hidden potential of Yun Seong's skill just by looking at him. Moreover, his teaching method is incredibly effective, and there is hardly a skill that allows one to see the defects and shortcomings of other people's skills. But the skill of analysis is not even his main specialty. Yun Seong saw everything with his own eyes. The guy is a combat-class hunter. Surely the emotion recognition skill is a bonus from some item received from the artifact store. However, no item can give such outstanding abilities. In that case, what is his own level of skill? As Yun Seong thought, Kim Gi-rae is an incredible person. Kim Gi-ryo interrupted his thoughts and asked the boy if something was wrong. I asked him if he had already mastered the new skill. Yun Seong Woo is so embarrassed. What a shame! He couldn't realize the full potential of his skill. Even after being taught by such an outstanding person, he said that he was trying, but learning was difficult. Bows to apologize. He is wasting Kim Gi-rae's precious time, and therefore will try to perfect the skill as soon as possible. Kim Gi-ryo replied that there was no need to rush. If it didn't work out today, they could come back tomorrow without any problem. Nobody is rushing him, and the hunter's business can wait. He will give him as much time as he needs. Yun Seong is happy that the guy is so generous with his knowledge to help him regain his confidence, and even calms him down with obvious lies, just so Yun Seong doesn't feel guilty. From the very first meeting, he understood that this was an extraordinary person, and he would repay him for his kindness. And he asked him if Kim Gi-ryo needed anything from him. Maybe he could help him with something, but Kim Gi-ryo replied that he didn't need anything at all. Yun Seong expected him to answer like that. Greed and selfishness are alien to him. How stupid was his question? He was confused and began to stutter. This man cannot be bribed with material goods like other people. Yun Seong thought that after reaching A rank, he would be able to do anything, but it turns out that he can't even properly express his gratitude. He said that, as the guy told him, he wouldn't overexert himself today, and they could finish. He walks forward and asks if it's time for them to go back. For now, he will only study diligently under his guidance, and one day he will certainly become useful to him. Kim Gi-ryo was thinking that even though he said that he didn't need anything, he hoped that the guy didn't suspect him. This is unlikely to be the case, since he tried to extract his own monetary benefit. Moreover, he thinks that for an A rank, this is a mere trifle. In that case, a C or B rank gate is definitely worth a look. Selling all the loot Kim Gi-rae collected today would be enough to cover his rent. He should treat himself to some rice soup later. Together they walked out of the gate and were met by Song Woo. She greeted Yun Seong and said that he was quite late considering that this was a D-rank gate. She just needed to notify him, but things changed. She approached Kim Gi-rae and asked if he was definitely an F rank. But in that case, why did he come out of that gate? He was recently suspected of rank fraud and was even forced to undergo a re-examination. And the girl never expected that the guy would break the rules. And then, immediately after the charges were dropped, he was caught entering a dungeon that did not correspond to his rank. Kim Gi-rae said that he entered as a porter, which is his job with Yun Seong. Song Woo didn't understand what kind of excuse this was. What could possibly be carried in that tiny bag? She said that this also applies to Yun Seong. If he is caught in illegal activities, there will be no end of problems. Kim Gi-ryo started to say that as far as he knew, the association did not prohibit this. The girl said, "Yes, porters are allowed to enter high-ranking dungeons. But this only applies to real porters, not those who take advantage of the loophole." And he hopes he already understands how suspicious it is. A regular F rank follows all the rules to avoid danger. Given his activities, it is not surprising that Kim Gi-rae has attracted unwanted attention, and he only asks them to cooperate with the association. Kim Gi-ryo replied that he understood everything because he cannot answer anything else for now. Because the girl had been nice to him lately, he forgot that the one standing in front of him was an awakened B rank. Hunters of her level could tear apart a huge lion with their bare hands. There is no point in provoking unnecessary aggression. Seon-woo asks Hunter Yoon-sung to come with her because she has a report regarding a recent dungeon. In front of her, even A-rankers can't act thoughtlessly. It looks like this method of earning money won't support Kim Gi-ryo for long. He says goodbye to his comrade and thinks that for now, there is nothing left for him to do. He already has a backup plan prepared for such an eventuality. The next day, he lay in his bed and read information about the Twin Angels bracelet. Lately, it had become a habit for him to check all the news from the Awakened immediately after waking up. It seems that there is no more information about what he was looking for. It is not surprising that it was found out recently because the bracelet first appeared in the X-Rank workshop gate. Kim Gi-rae kept the bracelet in case Young-ha contacts him, but it seems to be in vain. He tried on the bracelet and noticed that it fit perfectly, an item he had kept as a treasure. For some reason, he decided to try on that day. He decides that it's time to go out. His experiment today is a bit risky. He came to the lawn and started looking for something. He's not sure if what he was looking for was here, but then a portal appears in front of him. Green, and he understands what he has found. F-rank dungeon, low danger level. Gates are divided into blue and red. This refers to blue ones, and usually do not even contain a boss. Small, weak monsters constantly appear here. If you kill them all, the gates will close. Today, the guy came to hunt. Entry is actually free, so it's the perfect place to practice since his original method of earning money is cancelled due to Seong-woo's warning. Kim Gi-ryo decided that it would be a good idea to try hunting monsters of his level. The guy entered the portal, but found himself on a light flower meadow. Not far from him, ungulate animals with 6 legs were walking. The braying goat is a monster that resembles a broken violin because of the firewood. Kim Gi-ryo now understands where the strange sound was coming from. Although they appear harmless on the outside, they are some of the most dangerous F-rank monsters, and the income from them is correspondingly high. Kim Gi-ryo drinks his miracle potion. He is glad that it works. His mana is filling up. Such a scene cannot fail to attract attention. The guy exudes enormous power. Finally, those monsters noticed him. But it's too late, because the guy has more magic than anyone on Earth and shoots fire at them. A huge fireball flies towards one of the goats. But before it can reach the target, the magic immediately dissipates, only slightly injuring the animal's face. The goat immediately becomes completely enraged. Her horns become larger, veins appear on her face, and she puffs. And then, without wasting time, he runs towards the guy with a huge noise. Kim Gi-ryo is very scared and grabs his head. He thought so. He knew that it would all end like this. Of course, it was an F-rank spell. He slowed down for just a moment and turned his head back as the goat almost caught up with him. Kim Gi-ryo couldn't understand how this monster managed to be so fast despite its size. He ran without turning back, with all his might, heading towards the portal. There was very little left to it. There was only one thought in his head. He couldn't allow himself to die so stupidly. Not here and not now. But the monster was already almost right there. Literally a few centimeters away. It opened its mouth and tried to bite. Its huge teeth clicked in the air. But the guy managed to run into the portal at the last moment and disappear. Fortunately, the creatures from the dungeon cannot leave the gate and pursue the victim outside. However, Kim Gi-ryo, having climbed outside, immediately felt how depleted his supply of magical power was. He didn't think it was that bad. He felt like everything inside was empty and burnt out, and his endurance wasn't any better. After all, he hadn't run that far, and he was already almost falling over from fatigue. Suddenly, he meets some guy who immediately recognized Kim Giryo and started saying that they hadn't seen each other for many years. He noticed that they hadn't seen each other for so long, and Kim Giryo was still hunting. And didn't he remember him? They got the hunter license together and entered the gate. Doesn't he remember? He's Jae-hyun, the team leader. Kim doesn't understand who this old acquaintance is, and if this person knew the real Kim Giryo, he'd better not blab too much. Jae-hyun says that he thinks the guy's name was Kang Hiro, and he replies that it was almost, his name is Kim Girye. Jae-hyun immediately started talking about whether he remembered how they couldn't handle the monster and started running away from it. It probably looked very funny from the outside, but, to be fair, it was their first raid. He asked the guy why he came out of this gate. Was he really going on a solo raid? Kim Giryo replied that yes, he came for a short hunt. Jae-hyun started to say that he was back to his old ways. Had he forgotten? They had promised to speak to each other less formally. Kim Gi-rae apologized, saying that he had been a bit confused lately and would speak less formally. The situation is problematic, but he must use this opportunity. He still has many gaps in his memory after reincarnation, and this person can become the one who will fill in the particles. Jae-hyun started saying that in any case, their meeting was a great success. Maybe they would form a team again and work together. He thinks that it is too hard for him to be alone, and there is just one place in his new squad. He points to the side and asks if he sees those guys. There are 3 men standing to the side, unknown to him. Jae-hyun explained that this is the team he is currently working in. The one with the huge axe is their leader, and he has a D rank. He asks what Kim Girye thinks about this. If he agrees, then they can leave now, but the guy replied that he has exhausted his mana, so he cannot continue. More precisely, the thing is that he had already used a dose of mana enhancer. Jae-hyun said that the guy misunderstood him. The team doesn't need a hunter. In fact, the empty space is a porter slot. None of them want to hunt with uncomfortable backpacks on their shoulders and ask Kim Giryo to help them out. They promise to pay him generously for this. Kim Giryo thinks about it. Maybe he should just carry the load once. Well, if the job involves only that, then he can earn money and at the same time see how an ordinary rank-and-file team works. Maybe it's not a bad offer. Jae-hyun watches the guy with a strange smile. Together they entered the gate, where they were met by a huge horned monster. It looked like a bull, with pink stones on its hooves, a huge horn on its nose, and eyes without pupils. One of the guys took out a bright star. The boss said that one powerful blow was needed, and no one should stand directly in front of the monster. When the monster screamed, it burst out of the pink crystals and started running towards them. They were told to get ready. And when the monster was already very close, its horns lit up with a blue light. The boss said that now was the time. All the other guys had their weapons activated and were ready. One man threw a whip at the monster, and the second began to use magic, and tree roots began to emerge from the ground. The whole spell worked. The monster was wrapped in threads of magic, and he began to scream furiously, unable to break free from the bonds. Now even his neck was tightly fixed, as was his entire body. He was literally nailed to the ground. The group's boss, without wasting a second, clenched the axe in his hands and brought it down with force on the immobilized monster. Kim Giryo watched with interest and slight surprise as the team members worked together in unison. When the monster finally stopped moving, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They had won, and smiles appeared on their faces. Obviously, everyone was pleased with how well they had worked together. Kim Giryo mentally noted that their teamwork was indeed at a good level. They acted in a coordinated manner. Some distracted the enemy, luring them to the right place, while others finished the job. The mages standing behind activated the trap at the right moment, and it worked flawlessly. It was reminiscent of an old hunting tactic, how primitive people would drive a mammoth into a pit with stakes. With such skills, no EF rank monster would be a hindrance, and they decided that it was time to finish. They asked Kim Giryo to hand over the backpack to the boss, since he would carry it himself from then on. The boss thanked the guy because he was a great help. Their previous porter turned out to be a slob who would have thought that he would not show up today. They said the guy was tougher than they thought, and to tell the truth, They thought he would quickly run out of steam on the way. Since he is Jae-hyun's old friend, it's not right to offend him with payment. Kim Gil-yo watched with interest as the man counted the bills to see how much money they would give him. And when he received the bill, he said that it was too much for a simple porter. The boss said they hired him on short notice and the pay was fair. And then he asked if he would have any free time tomorrow. In fact, they wanted to close another dungeon, but the old porter had disappeared somewhere, and it would be difficult to find a new one. So he personally would prefer it if it was Kim Gil-yo. As the guy was accepting payment, the boss noticed a gold bracelet on his arm and asked him what he thought of it. The whole team was sitting in a cafe. Jae-hyun was saying that the item on Kim Gil-yo's wrist was definitely a new artifact from the X-Gate. I asked what if it was a fake, but Polina replied that information about this bracelet was published only yesterday, and it was unlikely that anyone had managed to make a fake in such a short time. He wondered if he had anything else besides the bracelet. He seemed like an ordinary beggar to them, but even if not, the artifact alone would bring them a lot of money. It is not uncommon to find a special type of person in the world of hunters. They do not risk hunting dangerous and ferocious monsters, but instead target easier prey. Most often, their victims are inexperienced hunters who are not accustomed to raiding dungeons. They are the main source of income. Such people are often compared to animals that eat their own kind. In the hunting world, they are called frogs. They discuss that if they choose that gate, then no one will detect them for sure, and so they ask Jae-hyun, since he once worked with this guy, if there is anything they should know in advance. He replied that nothing. This is the most pitiful worm of all that he has ever met. He is not even able to run properly, and the most disgusting thing is that their crime is not limited to simple robbery. This weakling even fled from the EF rank dungeon in tears. The boss spears the meat with his fork and understands that this means the job will be easy. Often the matter escalates into murder for pleasure. The next day, Kim Gi-rae sat on a bench outside the building, absent-mindedly staring at his phone screen. There was not a soul around. It seemed he had arrived too early, before the appointed time. Since the previous day, one thought had been spinning in his head, and it hadn't given him any peace. Every time I looked at Jae-hyun's face, foggy, unclear memories would appear before my eyes. And then suddenly, a voice was heard. The boss came up and asked how long he had been waiting for them here. Kim Gil-yo looked up and calmly asked if the payment would really remain the same as yesterday. The man said that he had even withdrawn cash in advance. The gate was in the nearest alley, so they were going there straight away. Together, they entered the portal, where everything was covered in lava and hot stones. Kim Gil-yo asked the guy if it was true that there were two bosses in this gate, and he replied that it was true. Kim Gil-yo thinks that usually the gate disappears once you defeat the boss, but as long as there is a living person inside, the dungeon does not collapse. When the opportunity arises, he wants to thoroughly investigate the gate phenomenon. But for now, it is worth focusing on the current task. Even if he could earn good money as a porter, in the future, he would have to rely on Yun Sung's help. Suddenly, Kim Gil-yo called everyone present, changed, and they turned their attention to him. The guy said he felt like they had been down this path before. He pointed to the side because the corpse of the monster they had killed earlier was lying right here, which meant they had taken a wrong turn somewhere. I asked if anyone had any navigation skills, and all the men looked at each other strangely. When Kim Gil-yo turned away to say something else, the boss took out a bottle of potion and swung it at the boy. Gil-yo on the head with all his might. He fell to the ground, shook, and started clutching the back of his head. The boss told him not to worry. After all, while he's unconscious, everything will already be over. Kim Gil-yo didn't understand why they attacked him and why Earthlings like to hit people over the head with bottles. Jae-hyun said mockingly that he didn't expect this guy to withstand the blow, but it didn't matter. He wouldn't last even 5 seconds against the paralyzing effect. Kim Gil-yo began to think that they were a bunch of ignorant fools, and if they thought that such a pathetic trick would work on him, they were very much mistaken. His immunity to paralysis was impeccable. What worries him more is not the effect of the potion, but its disgusting, pungent smell. One guy turned to the boss and said that it seemed like 5 seconds had already passed. Kim Gil-yo decided that in any unclear situation, the best solution was to run away. And then he jumped up and ran to the side, and everyone was amazed at how he could run so fast. The boss shouted and ordered everyone to grab this guy. Kim Giryo decides that she needs to shed the extra weight and throws away her bag. He decides that he needs to find a way out of here first, but his leg is grabbed by a vine. And then he pulls him towards himself, and the guy falls. Jae-hyun conjures these vines with his hands and says that it's all amazing. Kim Gi-rae was still suffering from a limp last year, but now it seems he has recovered. The guy asks why it matters to him, and why they are doing this at all. The boss doesn't understand why this guy hasn't passed out yet. Jae-hyun says he has no idea himself, but the bracelet is still on his hand. The boss orders him to be lowered to the ground. Jae-hyun pulls back his vines and the boy falls to the floor. He grabs his head, and suddenly someone turns to him. The boss tells him to listen carefully. If he tries to escape again, he will pull out his teeth and then finish him off. Kim Giryo raises his hands and asks them to calm down, asking what they want from him. But when his sleeve rolls up and everyone looks at the bracelet, everything becomes clear. He waves his hand to the side and sees that all the guy's eyes are glued to his hand. Then he waves his hand in the other direction and notices that the men are again looking at the bracelet. He asks if all this is because of this bracelet. Kim Giri now understands why they tried to knock him out. According to information from Pixie, the function of this bracelet is absolute protection against any two attacks. It doesn't matter what type of damage is dealt. This artifact can protect twice even from attacks from an S-rank monster. Who would have thought that a protective artifact would get him into such trouble? If it was just the bracelet, he would give it up. But they would probably kill the guy so as not to leave any evidence of the crime. The boss, with fury on his face, says that he asks him to give him the bracelet for the last time. He reaches out his hand to him and says that then maybe he will spare him. Kim Giryo shouts for the boss not to dare come closer. He tells everyone to step back or he'll use up both charges. Do they really think the guy is crazy enough to just give up the bracelet? For now, he can use the artifact to his advantage. When activated, it can count any weak hit as an attack, spend one charge, and after both charges are depleted, it will turn into a regular decoration. But this puts them in a stalemate. He asks Jae-hyun if they should just let him go. Kim Giryo promises to keep what happened here a secret. After all, he was not seriously injured, and there is no evidence to accuse them. Jae-hyun asks if he thinks they don't realize that the guy will spill the beans at the first opportunity. The boss can't take it anymore, grits his teeth and kicks the guy. He grabs him by the collar and asks if he really thought he was joking with him. Some pathetic F-rank uses an artifact and sets conditions for the boss. He will not tolerate this nonsense. He starts throwing a few punches and says, "Come on, use the bracelet." However, he must remember that by spending them, he will be signing his own death warrant. Kim Giryo, already covered in blood, stops the man and says that he will give them the item if he just stops. The boss looks at him with a slight grin, not understanding why he didn't do it right away if everything was so simple from the very beginning. Kim Gi-rae bitterly realizes that such a reaction is common for those who were born weak, since he is only an F-rank. For people like him, the world is full of ridicule, humiliation, and constant pressure. To be weak means to be nobody. And now, at this moment, he urgently needs to find a way to escape and not let himself be caught or broken again. He slowly rolls up his sleeve, revealing a bracelet, an artifact, perhaps his last hope. The thought that all this could end in death flashes through my head, causing my heart to clench for a second. Suddenly, there is a sound of footsteps. Someone is clearly approaching, and the boss turns around sharply, not understanding who entered. Surprise appears on their faces. They recognize the person who has entered, but they cannot understand why he is here. It was a famous hunter, a male A-rank named Yoon Seong, whose appearance no one expected. Just 30 minutes ago, Kim Giryo had been texting him, hoping that he would read the message and understand. Yoon Sung walked out of the cafe and said that he was very lucky. Even after he lost his value, Kim Giryo still helped him. Previously, he could at least be a tool to enter a high-ranking gate. But after Song-woo caught him and scolded him, he was afraid that he would become completely useless. But Kim Giryo still decided to allocate his precious time for him. It seemed that the heavens themselves smiled upon him by sending such a noble man. Yoon Sung had a vanilla latte in his hand, which he planned to treat his friend to once they met. But after 20 minutes, he is sitting on a bench all alone. He looks at his watch and doesn't understand whether he's really late. Quite a lot of time has already passed. Kim Giryo said he was going into a dungeon, so it can't be that difficult. And then he thought that it could be an anomalous dungeon. A mutation occurred, due to which the level of the gate suddenly increased. He runs away, leaves the coffee on the bench. After all, this is a very rare occurrence, and yet he decides to help. He comes to the portal and thinks that he must check everything just in case. He walks in and is immediately surrounded by an atmosphere of hot rocks and lava. The guy thinks that there is no need to worry so much. After all, it is just an F-rank gate, and it looks like all the monsters have been dealt with. He walks around, looks around, and does not understand where Kim Giryo is. Suddenly he hears a strange sound and recognizes the voice. He knows for sure that it was Kim Giryo who shouted and runs towards the sound. He notices a picture in front of him of 3 guys standing aside while their boss beats up a guy. Everyone is immediately surprised when they see an A-rank hunter. What is he even doing here? Kim Gi-rae shouts at the guy that all these people are a gang of robbers, and they tried to kill him for the artifact. Yoon Seong can't understand whether he's imagining all this, why Giryo is lying on the ground in such a state. But then he pulls himself together, because now is not the time to think about it, and asks the guys if it is true that they are frogs. Yoon Sung calls them trash who profit from other hunters. The boss orders all his comrades to run immediately, but Yoon Sung turns out to be stronger, and at the same second appears behind the boss, grabbing him by the head. He pushes the man with all his might, and he hits the ground. As it turns out, there are frogs even among the lower ranks. Against such insignificant enemies, no tactics are required. Everyone else starts running away as fast as they can. The only thing to remember is to restrain your strength so as not to accidentally finish them off. Yoon Sung catches up with the next guy and throws him to the ground. After this, a shield appears in his hand, with which he hits the second opponent in the face. And after a couple of seconds, he grabs the third one by the collar. With sufficient force, he throws it to the side. After that, he steps on his shoulder, and the guy starts screaming. Yoon Seong realizes that they are all very weak, D rank or even F, and cannot believe how Kim Giryo could lose to them. Kim Giryo lags behind at this time and thanks the guy because he came just in time. Yoon Sung approaches him and asks if everything is okay, and he replies that he is fine and there is no need to worry. He apologizes because, given that incident, he understands how hard it was for Yoon Seong to enter the dungeon alone. By the way, is it true? When was the last time Yoon Seong entered the dungeon without Giryo? The sounds coming from the gate alone gave him goosebumps, but the thought that his friend might have been hurt overcame all doubts. Yoon Sung thought that his partner had set everything up on purpose so that he would overcome his fear. While all their enemies were lying on the floor, Kim Giryo said that they first needed to get out of here, and from the outside, they will report about these people. Yoon Sung walked towards the exit, wondering how he hadn't realized it all right away. Kim Giryo didn't even try to take precautions in case the other hunters attacked him, all because he had foreseen the situation in advance. Well, if he's just making all this up, what reason would he have? Kim Giryo turned to his friend and said that if his awakening level were higher, he would definitely create a team with him. Being strong is one thing, but it's much harder to find people willing to rush to help, because hunters like Yoon Seong are a rarity. And he said so that he would know. He is truly a worthy awakened one. Tears appeared on Yoon Sung's face. Could it really be that if he was of a high level, he would have created a team with him? Come to think of it, all this time he had been hesitant to assemble a new squad. Every day of his had been wasted because of that incident. As the leader of the group, he was unable to protect his comrades and even found it difficult to make new acquaintances. But it was at this moment that the opportunity arose to help a loved one. It was as if Giryo had deliberately created conditions similar to that terrible incident in order to suppress his bitter experience and give him a sense of success. Now, he had no doubt that this was the genius part of his plan, to make him go through the gate and even let him hit him. All those wounds are part of a big performance, and Yoon Sung can't believe that the guy is willing to go so far for others. Yoon Sung decides to ask the guy directly why he cares about him so much. He explains so much and helps with training. Kim Gi-rae only replies that Yoon Sung is a good guy and he doesn't need any other reason. These words bring a smile to Yoon Sung's face, as expected from his friend, and together they begin to walk towards the portal. When they came out, Kim Gi-rae was glad that they had finally gotten out and asked his friend to help report everything. And then he apologized and asked to reschedule the training for another day because he wanted to go home. Yoon Sung asked if it would be better for him to go to the hospital. He could call a healer he knew. Kim Gi-rae waved goodbye and told him not to worry. He would handle everything himself. Yoon Sung asked, "Isn't it difficult for F ranks to heal themselves since the potions are very expensive?" Or did the guy finally decide that he was no longer going to pretend to be a simple F rank in front of him? Kim Gi-rae walked towards the house, holding his side, and thought about how much pain he was in. Now he would definitely die. A few days later, he examines his body at home. He was really battered then. He finally recovered. It was a terrible week. First he was kidnapped by human traffickers, then almost killed by awakened hunters. And today, he is being summoned to the association. They could have done everything at once. What is the point of rehashing his situation? Kim Gi-rae puts on his clothes and thinks how lazy he is to go there. But, unfortunately, complaining won't help matters. He wonders if he should take the bracelet with him. Perhaps he can, if he hides it under his sleeve. As it turned out later, the price of this artifact at auction exceeded hundreds of millions of won. But this amount was still not enough to purchase the dragon lungs. Kim Gi-rae decided to hold off on selling the artifact. For now, he needed to keep it with him, but out of sight. 2 charges of absolute protection. For a hunter like him, you never know when it will come in handy. When he left the house, he saw some car and didn't understand why it was parked there in broad daylight. But when the glass rolled down, he recognized the guy sitting inside as Kang Chang-ho.